The night was like a wild roller coaster ride. A thunderstorm was going full blast over the city, and lightning bolts were playing hopscotch with the rooftops of tall buildings. But that wasn't the only freaky thing happening. A car was zipping down the road like it was in a high-octane movie, clearly trying to escape from some pesky pursuer who was right on its tail. The mother clutched her child tightly as if she were a bear protecting her cub from the big bad world. She soon figured out that the folks from the Ning family were hot on their trail. Her husband was scratching his head, baffled as to why these ruffians were after them. After all, he had already thrown in the towel in the inheritance game. Apparently, that wasn't enough for those who got the bright idea to stop the car by shooting through the windshield. To dodge a nasty collision with these lunatics, the guy slammed on the brakes. Except plot twist, the brakes were toast and the car just wouldn't stop. To top it off, the doors decided to join the fun by refusing to open. The parents gasped as they realized the only way to save their kid was to toss him out of the car, a move that could either save him or have him hitting the ground harder than a sack of potatoes. In a last-ditch effort, the dad yelled to his son Ning Bay that he absolutely had to stay alive. The car then plummeted off the bridge at breakneck speed, diving straight into the water, leaving no hope for those on board. Fast forward 13 years, Ning Bay had transformed into a full-grown young man who had his sights set on some serious, unfinished business. He had returned to Dragon City to settle scores from a decade ago and find those who had robbed him of his loved ones. A loud shout yanked the boy out of his daydream about the beautiful city ahead. A stunning girl approached her companion, Mr. Liang, reporting that her limited edition shoes had met an unfortunate fate. She explained that an old man had dirtied them and had the audacity to say he'd pay up. Lang grumbled that the old coot shouldn't even think about coming near him, and added that the value of his girlfriend's shoes was so high, the old man couldn't even afford the thoughts of it. Turning to his bodyguard, the gentleman ordered him to toss the old man overboard to let the fish have a feast. The fact that some rich punk thought he could play God with other people's lives really ticked Ning Bay off. Ning Bay marched over to the group and declared that as long as he was on this ship, nobody was messing with that elderly gentleman. With a scowl, Liang asked who had the guts to block his path, as though he hadn't caught wind of who owned this city. Ning Bay irritably asked if the jerk even knew who the old man he was about to toss overboard was. The question earned him some sneering chuckles from Liang and his date, who clearly didn't have a clue. It was obvious they didn't give a hoot about who stood in front of them, but Ning Bay pressed on, explaining that the old man was a veteran fireman, and those scars decorating his face weren't just fashion statements, but badges of honor. This old guy had defended the city from raging flames and saved countless lives, and yet some punk thought he could humiliate him. Ning Bay believed people like Liang should be eliminated. Hearing this, the wealthy brat puffed up, claiming that nobody in Dragon City would dare touch him because he belonged to the Lang family, but Ning Bay wasn't about to back down. Instead, he moved closer to the cocky kid, who began to back away nervously. Noticing the growing panic on Liang's face, Ning Bay leaned in even closer, asking in a menacing tone if the Liang family really wielded that much power. Before waiting for an answer, he snagged the fast-talking punk by the collar and hoisted him into the air. He then casually tossed his opponent onto the ground, relishing the sight of the creep struggling to get back on his feet. As he approached the guy sprawled on the floor, Ning Bay teased that he could easily show what real strength looked like. At last the liner docked, and the passengers were free to disembark into the city. The young noble from the Liang family was being helped out by his bodyguards, looking so beaten that he could barely stand. But he still had enough energy to hurl out a few empty threats. Ning Bay just shrugged them off. They were nothing but hot air. Guys like him were no real threat, only tough, when they had their security team backing them up. In situations like that, they all puffed out their chests like peacocks. Liang finally fell silent when the sound of approaching soldiers caught his ear. Ning Bay smiled, thinking how this spoiled brat would soon learn he wasn't the only player in this game. Soldiers marched toward the ship, their uniforms proudly displaying a red sword emblem. Mr. Liang was clueless about what was going on. His companion whispered for him to keep it cool. After all, judging by the crest, the elite blades of the King of the North were standing right in front of him. An elite squad of soldiers formed up just before stepping off the liner, saluting whoever was coming down to meet them. Raising their swords, the soldiers cheered in unison as they welcomed their commander home. As he descended, Ning Bay declared that he was just an ordinary guy without a title, so they could just call him by his first name. Bowing his head, the squad leader insisted they couldn't address the commander simply by his first name. It went against their key rules. As he drew closer, Ning Bay told him he didn't expect to see Mu Chung among those there to greet him at all. The guy asked how his commander's journey had gone, and it was time to share the tale of a rich kid who thought way too highly of himself, claiming that no one in Dragon City would dare to touch him. When the soldiers turned to face the arrogant upstart with friendly smiles, time to share the tale of a rich kid who thought way too highly of himself, claiming that no one in Dragon City would dare to touch him. When the soldiers turned to face the arrogant upstart with friendly smiles, it was time to share the tale of a rich kid who thought way too highly of himself, claiming that no one in Dragon City would dare to touch him. When the soldiers turned to face the arrogant upstart with friendly smiles, time to share the tale of a rich kid who thought way too highly of himself, claiming that no one in Dragon City would dare to touch him. When the soldiers turned to face the arrogant upstart with friendly smiles, he quickly began to throw out excuses, claiming it was all a big mix-up. Muching shot him a glaring look and whispered that he was more than happy to keep this misunderstanding going. Turning away, Ning Ben made it clear that the others weren't involved at all. Only Liang Yu, who had already been begging for mercy, deserved a slap on the wrist. Naturally, all those cries for help went unheard because it was time to settle the bills and fess up for your actions. Meanwhile, a young girl huffed to her grandma, saying they had been waiting for 30 minutes and still no sign of anyone. The young mistress was flabbergasted that her so-called fiancé was making her wait forever. She couldn't take it anymore. She told her grandma she was bolting right away. Grandma didn't even blink at her granddaughter's theatrics. But as soon as the girl made a move to leave, the old lady warned her that if she took one more step, she'd be learning how to live with a broken leg. A couple of minutes later, a young man came sprinting toward them, declaring that the groom had finally arrived, and there was Ning Bay himself making his grand entrance on the horizon. He was flanked by the northern crew. Spotting him, Grandma immediately told Shin he to take her seat and act like a proper young lady. Then a guy stepped in front of the squad, saying that Mu Chung had crossed the line. When he ran into the commander, he forgot all about the rules and thought wrongdoers deserved a slap on the wrist. Grandma explained that in front of them was a central blade named Zhang Zhongquan, who was confronting his ward Mu Chung, the northern tiger. But Ning Bay stepped in and said he was beyond thrilled to see Yonuan since it had been ages since their last rendezvous. Bowing to the guy, the man stated that as commander of Central China, he was chuffed to welcome his northern buddy. He then added that all 5 big bosses were ready to serve him. Ning Bay reminded him that these accolades weren't necessary, as they were on equal footing. After that, the young man's gaze drifted to the old woman next to a stunning girl. Kneeling before the old lady, our hero bowed. The old woman commented that he had certainly grown, although he looked a bit too skinny for someone his size. Ning Bay was thrilled to see his grandma, since she was his last link to the days when both his parents were still alive. Noticing the gloomy look on his face, the woman quickly dragged him toward the car that would take them home. Before hopping into the car, the hero gave orders to the soldiers. Much and his crew were sent packing to North China while Zhang Quan insisted on sticking by his side. The 2 fancy cars zoomed through the lively streets of Dragon City. Inside the limousine, the old lady sat across from Ning Bay and murmured that 13 years had flown by in the blink of an eye. Nodding, the boy reminded her that if it hadn't been for his grandma's protection, he would have kicked the bucket on that dreadful night. The old lady flashed a sweet smile, then patted the hand of the girl beside her, saying her name was Su Ching He. The young man knew exactly who he was dealing with, so he said that if the young mistress didn't fancy their wedding, she could chill and break off the engagement. Chin-hee leaped from her seat in sheer glee. Grew up pretty quickly because he kicked the bucket that unforgettable night. The old lady beamed at him, then reached out and patted the hand of the girl beside her, saying her name was Su Ching He, the young one. She couldn't believe her fiancé was totally cool with it. But alas, it was her grandma who wasn't thrilled and told her to calm down this instant. The disgruntled girl reminded him it was the 21st century, and she, being a medieval princess, fancied marrying someone she was betrothed to as a kid. The old woman sternly reminded her that this engagement had been arranged by the grandfather of King B, so as long as she was breathing, nobody would dare call off the wedding. When the guy remarked that his fiancée had a mind of her own, the woman quickly shifted gears. She then asked if Ning Bay had a chance to meet the Central Blade and Northern Tiger. Grinning, our hero noted that he and Yong Quan were pretty tight. The man often sharpened and polished his sword. Hearing that it was hard for the girl to fathom that the renowned commander of Central China was into cleaning anyone's weapon, ignoring Chin-hee's incredulous glares, Ning Bay assured that if the girl was dear to his grandma, he would guard her for life. He then instructed Zhang Quan to announce to the world on his behalf that the young lady was under his protection, so that if anything happened to her, the sword of the Northern King would definitely rain down on the culprit. While Granny was showering praises on the young man, Chin-hee felt he was getting a bit too possessive for her liking. When the limo finally rolled up to their home, the guards rushed out to greet their mistress. Our hero was a real gentleman, so naturally he helped the old woman out of the car. The family members also spilled out of the house, instantly recognizing Ning Bay and indignantly demanding to know why she had brought him back into their lives. The guy fumed that everyone knew that incident was no accident, yet the grandmother had still saved the boy, ticking off the 3 heads of the Ning family. This irate gentleman insisted she should break off the engagement and send Ning Bay packing. All the household members agreed with this verdict. They didn't want this guy to have anything to do with their family. Watching the scene unfold, Chin-hee realized she could barely put up with all these high-handed snobs, but they were guests from far away. This pushy dude insisted she should dump Ning Bay like yesterday's leftovers. Everyone in the house nodded in agreement like they were at a bad pep rally. They were all totally against this guy being a part of their family. Watching the whole spectacle, Chin-hee realized she was about to reach her limit with these stuck-up folks, but hey, they were just guests from way out of town. So being polite to them was a must. The shouting finally settled down when Ning Bay stepped up and demanded silence. After that, Grandma piped up, declaring that this dude was now part of her family. As long as she was breathing, nobody could touch him, totally ignoring that her granddaughter was vehemently against this whole marriage idea. Ning Bay calmly stated that if his future fiancée wasn't into the engagement, that was perfectly fine. In that case, he'd just treat her like a little sister. In his view, breaking off the engagement would be terrible for the Su family's reputation, but if they wanted to write a rejection letter themselves, he would gladly sign it. Such a noble gesture left the girl speechless. She asked if this situation would hurt Ning Bay's own reputation, but he shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal. Those words made the guy's facial expressions a bit less hostile. He told her that under those conditions, they'd end the engagement right away. Yong Quan got fed up with the nonsense, so the warrior whipped out a blade and said if they tried to pull this, he'd wipe out their entire family. But Ning Bay shut him down, telling him to mind his manners. In response, the Lord smugly asked what kind of bold newbie thought he could destroy his family. That question ticked Zhang Quan off. Proudly, he announced his name and added that he was the commander of Central China, so he had the power to bring down any wealthy family. At that moment, the northern squad showed up. Commander Mu Chang quickly declared that he was also ready to jump in on the destruction of this family. After those threats, the southern commander Go Byong stepped in and said he could take down Ning Bay's harassers too and help obliterate their kind. He was backed by the western commander, Liu Ge, who was all in to support his buddy. The 4 men were seriously intimidating, making it quite dangerous to argue with them. Our hero realized he was now facing 4 out of 5 commanders, and they were all on his side. Guabai Fang and Louis warmly welcomed the returning king Ning Bay. The arrival of such high-profile guests completely rattled the family head. Glancing at the man's anxious face, the northern tiger smirked and asked if anyone honestly thought they couldn't handle taking down some hoity-toity snobs. While the family head remained in shock and silence, his younger relative boasted that no one could touch them. It was so cocky that Grandma felt the urge to smack him with her cane. Ning Bay barely managed to rein her in. The woman claimed that as long as the guy was by her side, she was untroubled, except she was really annoyed at the boys in the Su family, who just didn't get it. Ning Bay nodded along, signaling Yong Quan to put these punks in their place. No need to say it twice. Central Blade immediately issued a Level A alert. The word went out and actions were initiated. Hearing the commander's alert notices everyone in the office jumped into action. The stern-faced woman announced that fighters in 72 locations should be on alert. She also reached out to Zhang Quan to confirm the order, reminding him that if the common people got involved, the Dragon Guard would be on high alert, but Ning Bay thought 72 points was a bit much. In his opinion, 1 point would suffice. Sighing, the man informed his office employee that he was revoking the previous order since just one group would do. Despite her dissatisfaction, the woman agreed to follow through with the order. One of the staffers asked who the kid was that the commander was listening to, as he seemed to command a lot of respect. Sitting down in her chair, she reported that it was just a regular guy named Ning Bay. But everyone knew that such a person couldn't be labeled as ordinary or mediocre. He was known as the King of the North or the God of War. The employee had heard of him but didn't know much as his case was on the 9th floor and closed off to her. Meanwhile, the Sioux family members were clueless about how to react to all this bravado from the 4 so-called commanders. The boldest, or perhaps just the dumbest of them, scoffed that he saw no action. Just a lot of talk, so they must be hired actors putting on a show. That idea made the guy laugh so hard he started waving his phone around, claiming he'd hire a couple of actors for this production too. But when he glanced at his smartphone, he froze for a second at what he noticed, or rather what he didn't notice. There was no signal at all for anyone in the Sioux family. Just recently, everything had been perfectly fine with the connection. It made people suspect that this anomaly had something to do with the guy standing before them. Suddenly, everyone turned around and spotted a squad of dragon guards advancing toward the house, stating they were having an operation here, so outsiders should disperse. They came to arrest the Sioux family. That was the only explanation they got. Those words caused quite a stir, as the once brave men now had no idea what to do or where to run. Ning Bay calmed his grandma down, saying nothing bad would happen. These snobs would only get schooled. To lift the old lady's spirits a bit, he mentioned his plans to visit Ning's family today, but Grandma's reaction was the complete opposite. These snobs needed a crash course in humility. To lighten the old lady's mood, the guy chirped that his plans for the day included a visit to Ning's family. However, Grandma's reaction was nothing short of a major buzzkill. She scrunched her face, mouthing that all this went down 13 years ago. Now the dude was also super annoyed, saying that no matter how many years rolled by, that cosmic night that flipped his life upside down would forever be stuck in his brain like a catchy jingle. After he dropped that bomb, he flashed a grin again. Then, after waving goodbye to his grandma and Shin, he said, lastly, the old lady dropped the jaw-dropping news that turned Ning Bay's world into a roller coaster. According to her, the kid's mom didn't actually kick the bucket that very night. Upon hearing this, our hero froze like a deer caught in headlights. He thought this whole thing was a cruel prank because it simply couldn't be true. But the old gal continued with the juicy deets, saying his mom was rocking it as a professor at the university. Ning Bay was completely at a loss for words, unable to wrap his head around the fact that the person closest to him had ghosted him for 13 years and made him think she was dead. Meanwhile, it was just another day at Dragon City University. Students were slumped over in a lecture, half listening to the professor who was rolling around in a wheelchair. Amidst the sea of tired students barely holding on to their sanity, one guy stood out. He strolled in late and was peeking near the door, eyeing the professor. It took just one glance for the young man to realize that his mom tried to blend in with the other folks yapping about the best ways to skip class. But those students soon realized they couldn't just bail since the teacher was ruthless, and they could only escape with a written note explaining their absence. One student mused about why such a stunning woman was toiling away at the university, suggesting that she could be unable to stomach such trash talk. Ning Bay jumped in, insisting the kid treat the professor with more respect. Smirking, the creep shot back, saying he was just brainstorming alternative income streams for pretty ladies. Those words were the last straw for Ning Bay. He bolted from his seat, grabbed the blabbermouth, and slammed his face onto the table. The kid lifted his head and locked eyes with his mom, who he had believed was dead until that moment. The woman was completely taken aback. She instantly recognized that the boy in front of her was her son, who should have been in a safe haven. But nope, there he was in the city that once tried to do him in. Staring at her fully grown son was surreal, especially since she hadn't expected to see him at all. The university had way more drama going on inside its walls than she could have imagined. But soon, she told him the whole family needed to come together. So she asked her son to take her to the yard where his dad worked. Spotting Ning Bay, the man was in shock. He quickly recalled embracing his son. The father realized everything was finally falling into place. But then, after a heartbeat, the joy morphed into worry. The man began grilling his son about why he had come back to the city, explaining it was still dangerous there. Ning Bay reassured his parents not to stress, saying he was planning to use the Northern King Blade to pursue justice no less. Of course, his mom and dad were skeptical of their son's bold mission, yet he was clearly not backing down, so the family decided to head home. But they got interrupted by the loud screams of a girl who was pointing at her dad, who had just pummeled her boyfriend. The man was obviously important at the university because he demanded to know how the kid dared to lay hands on his student right in front of him. Ba's father stepped in to defend his son against the vice principal, who insisted the boy needed a lesson in discipline. The vice principal recalled how members of the Ning family had once begged him on their knees for work so he could boot them out at any moment. Hearing about his parents' humiliation stung Ba to the core, but his dad told him not to dwell on it. After all, they were in front of a member of the Ning family. The boy now understood that the man in front of him was one of the lapdogs of his continued to spew venom about his parents. Ning Bay lost it and ordered him to get down on his knees. After saying that, he swung his hand, unleashing a wave of powerful energy that slammed straight into the vice principal. She stumbled back, barely managing to stay on her feet while writhing in pain. Unable to bear the agony, the guy crumpled to his knees. His daughter gasped in horror at what he was doing. Ning Bay didn't even bother to give these people a second glance. He had decided it was time they paid for all the struggles and insults his parents had endured over the years. The pain from his shattered legs was so intense that the man's body reacted in an embarrassing way. Meanwhile, our hero's family had made their way to one of the seedier neighborhoods in Dragon City. His mom asked her husband to grab some groceries because she wanted to whip up something nice for her son. They arrived at the bottom of a grimy stairwell, and the dad casually said he would carry his wife downstairs while Ning Bay was tasked with wheeling the stroller. Ba was floored by these living conditions. He just couldn't believe that his influential parents were living like this. Ba's dad jumped in to defend his son against the vice principal, but the vice principal was having none of it and demanded that the kid learn some discipline. He reminisced about how members of the Ning family were on their knees begging for jobs, and he could have booted them out at any moment. Hearing about his parents groveling stung Ba, but his dad told him not to dwell on it. After all, they were in the presence of a member of the Ning family. The boy now realized that the man in front of him was just one of the hounds from his rotten clan. As the guy continued to trash talk, his parents Ning Bay snapped and told him to hit the deck. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he unleashed a wave of energy that slammed straight into the deputy. She stumbled to her feet, jolting with pain like she had just stepped on a Lego. Totally unable to handle the agony, the guy fell to his knees. His daughter looked on in horror, wondering what in the world he was doing. Ning Bay didn't even bother to glance at these losers. He decided it was time to make them pay for all the crap his folks had been through over the years. The pain in the dude's legs was so severe that his body reacted in a shameful way. Meanwhile, our hero's family had just arrived in one of the grittiest neighborhoods in Dragon City. His mom asked his dad to go buy some groceries because she wanted to whip up dinner for their son. They paused at the entrance to a sketchy basement, and his dad casually said he would carry Mom down the stairs, and Ba had to manage the stroller. Ba was floored by these living conditions. He simply couldn't wrap his head around the fact that his parents were influential folks living like this. Noticing the young man's stare, his pops chimed in that other than the sticky humidity, their place was pretty much average. But the kid ignored him completely and hollered for John Quan. As soon as Jean showed up, he was ordered to send some guys to grab their stuff and haul it out of there. His mom started to protest, trying to convince her son that they were used to this dump and moving wasn't worth the hassle. Baba wasn't hearing any of it. All that was on his mind was that exactly 13 years ago, on a day just like today, they'd been backed into a corner that led to some seriously bad juju. Grabbing his mom's stroller, he announced that when he got back to the capital, he was going to take down 3 people, starting with Ning Fuku. At that moment, it was announced that the commander of East China had joined the party. He reported that the sword of the Northern King was now in his grip. Flashing a warm smile at Bay, he joked around, asking him to hold on to the sword for just a few more days, because he needed more time to gawk at such a blade. With a smirk, the guy shot back, telling him to stop with the nonsense and just hand the sword over. The commander of East China complied, passing the sword back to its rightful owner. Without further ado, the solid weight of the metal felt fantastic in his hands. With the sword firmly held, Bay felt like a champ ready to take on the world. Turning to the warriors surrounding him, the kid asked them to step back a bit. He wanted some alone time with his parents. The commanders figured once the King of the North's sword was out of its sheath, nobody could stop it, so they were inclined to think that Ba's attackers were the real baddies. Still, Yong Quan knew a bit more, filling them in, that their rivals were the Ning family. They weren't exactly terrifying, but that didn't mean they could let their guard down. It was the night of the patriarch's birthday bash. Yuan Shen, the head honcho of the financial corporation, brought along a golden Buddha as a birthday gift. Rumor had it Mr. Liang was gifting a 100-year-old ginseng and 16 jade bracelets. But just a few minutes later, all the revelry hit the brakes because something downright outrageous went down. The familiar sound of a funeral procession echoed, and soon a coffin was carted in, making the guests jumpy, thinking it was a terrible omen. Leading the parade was the commander of East China, who mentioned that the iron bell and the old coffin were presents from a long-lost buddy. After saying that, he gave the bell a mighty whack. The sound was ear-piercing, sending chills through anyone nearby. The commander ordered his crew, walking by the coffin, to start wailing dramatically. Everyone knew that gifting a bell to a living person was basically wishing them dead, so it made total sense that these dudes were out to stir the pot. One guy stepped forward and seriously asked if they held any grudges against the Ning family, but the Eastern commander just grinned and signaled that no offense was intended whatsoever. After all, this was his debut in Dragon City. Plus, he added it was no picnic trying to snag a bell this size from the northern frontier, but hey, this city had been the capital of 8 dynasties for a reason. It was a treasure trove. The mention of the northern border flicked some curiosity for the guests. They recalled peeps who once rolled with them like Ning Chang and Ching Hong. There were whispers that their relatives were right there in front of them. And they were spot on, because the brilliant scheme behind this quirky gift belonged to Ning Bay. Coming with their mom, they were genuinely there to wish a long life to their beloved second-grade uncle. When everyone heard the name of the kid who managed to dodge death 13 years ago, whispers zipped around like wildfire, as rumors had it that someone had tried to finish him off. One guy in the crowd stepped up and asked if their elder brother's family had come back. Then he turned to Mrs. Hong, commenting that her chair looked like it needed a makeover. Her husband Nin Khan and Lin Guo chimed in that he'd tackle his wife's needs personally. One of the guests boldly suggested that the family should skedaddle back to where they came from. They were no longer welcome in high society, but he was quickly told to watch his mouth. The Ning family member, keeping it too nice, invited the relatives to step inside and chat. He thought digging up family skeletons in public was a terrible idea. Better to take care of these upstarts quietly. As our hero's family made their way to the entrance, the guests trailed behind like hungry predators, just waiting for their moment to strike. These folks were eager to create chaos, seizing every chance to do some harm, even with the most trivial of gestures. Ning Bay held his father steady, making sure he didn't take a tumble. He mentally noted that everyone who was cozy with his relatives deserved a taste of justice. The scoundrel who knocked Can down to the ground was his own brother, getting closer and declaring that today was the patriarch's birthday, meaning they should kneel. Our hero didn't fall for such bait, so he urged his father to hustle it, telling him they had to arrive in time to steal the spotlight of the event. The commander of East China stepped up and declared he'd handle the rebel himself. With that, he unsheathed his swords, ready to give these clueless folks a lesson in manners. A few heartbeats later, the commander's blades found their way into the legs of the Ning family troublemaker. They lodged themselves just above his knee, leaving him stranded. This was a signature technique from the northern border. This caught the attention of the oldest family member. He exclaimed with wide eyes that Bay was pushing his luck, which was putting it lightly because the kid had just started chatting up his foes. Now the dude nervously asked what the young man was planning to finish. After a moment's thought, Bay casually inquired about what they thought of completely wiping out the Ning family. Meanwhile, it started pouring, so most of the guests had to scamper inside the building. The patriarch, basking in his own glory, thanked everyone who showed up to congratulate him on this grand occasion. The idol showed up until the front doors slammed open by two commanders inviting the VIPs inside. Our hero's family waltzed into the spacious hall. The boy wished his granddad a long life, but his gaze hinted at an entirely different desire. Once the birthday boy spotted who stood before him, he almost dropped his glass. He quickly regained his composure and declared how thrilled he was to receive congratulations from such a talented and brave young man. Another relative started creeping toward Bay, commenting that he clearly didn't understand the etiquette rules, as he didn't kneel before the patriarch during the congratulation. Such words fired up the Eastern commander, who asked who this chatty guy thought he was. The blonde dude introduced himself since he didn't bow before the big boss during the congratulations. These comments made the Eastern commander fume, and he demanded to know who the blabbermouth thought he was. The blonde guy introduced himself as Liang Xiaolong, a name known by every passerby in Dragon City. Nobody dared to disrespect him, but the commander shot back that he had never heard of such a guy, so there was no reason for him to show any respect. One of the guests whispered that the dude standing there was nothing more than a useless insect. He then called for Xia Shan, who promptly came over. His serious face didn't spell good news. Noticing squad leader Xiao, the birthday boy instantly stiffened. People who had nothing to fear wouldn't be acting this way. Up to now, he'd managed to dodge disaster, as Xiao had his focus on that little brat who dared to disrespect the Eastern commander. The man thought that this insolent punk deserved to be chopped into tiny bits and fed to the dogs. A much better lesson would be to strip him of all his belongings, including side businesses. Shan Shan bowed to the central blade and promised he would fulfill his mission. Trouble hit the blonde guy hard as he got clocked in the face, leaving him with little hope of escaping. Mrs. Ching Hong Lang was not thrilled with all the violence, so she reminded her son of his promise to her. Guy immediately told his buddies to stop with the antics and get serious. Watching all this unfold, the patriarch couldn't wrap his mind around where all these enemies were coming from. He suspected they had bribed squad leader Xiao to be on their side. The family head recalled that Commander Xiao's crew had never meddled in their business before, so he was curious about what had changed today. Ning Bay's patience was wearing thin, and he suggested settling family affairs quietly and asked everyone else to leave the building. The guests were so freaked out they wanted no part in this showdown, so they hurriedly made their exit. Grinning, the old man mused that it probably cost a pretty penny to bribe the squad leader, and now that he was gone, there was nobody to back up this kid. Those words put a grin on the Eastern commander's face, as this old man clearly underestimated them, thinking they were just a bunch of nobodies. The head of the family really thought he was just dealing with a foolish kid who could be tossed out the door, which was exactly what he told one of his grandsons to do. Giving Konggu a look, the old man never imagined that the Ning family would boast their own entry-level master. Madam Ching Hong Lang felt uneasy and turned to her son, warning him to be cautious. After all this, Konggu was incredibly intimidating and clearly ready to do anything to wipe them out. But the moment Ning Bay activated his powers, the dude froze in place, utterly confused about why he couldn't move. Meanwhile, our guy ramped up the pressure of his power on him, commanding him to kneel down right away. His opponent crumpled to the ground and complied without even a peep. Everyone stood there, stupefied, unable to comprehend what just happened. For Konggu had never bowed to anyone, but here he was on his knees, instantly realizing he was feeling a weight of power, akin to that of a war god. Naturally, nobody wanted to believe that Bay had that kind of power, because that would make him a serious threat, and except our hero wasn't about to inquire what these folks wanted. He just let his power ripple throughout the hall, dragging those he wanted to crush down to their knees. Now, these rogue scoundrels were finally where they belonged, groveling at the feet of the boy they had never managed to kill. The Eastern commander noted that Bay reached the northern border at the tender age of 8 and hit warrior rank in just 1 month, so a Ning family fighter was no match for him. This revelation knocked the patriarch for a loop, finally realizing that the young man in front of him could pose a serious problem. Meanwhile, the commander continued with his but as soon as Ning Bay activated his abilities, the man froze in place, utterly confused about why he couldn't move. Meanwhile, our guy ramped up the pressure of his power on him, commanding him to kneel down right away. His opponent crumpled to the ground and complied without even a peep. Everyone stood there stupefied, unable to comprehend what just happened. For Kanggu had never bowed to anyone, but here he was on his knees, realizing with sheer horror that he was feeling a weight of power that was on the level of a god of war. Of course, no one wanted to believe that Bay possessed that level of strength, because then he would be a force to be reckoned with, and no one wanted to do that. Except our hero wasn't going to ask these people what they wanted. He let his power spread through the hall and bring those he so wanted to destroy to their knees. Now these scoundrels were where they belonged, at the feet of the boy they had never been able to kill. The Eastern commander said that Bay had gotten to the northern border when he was only 8 years old and had. These scoundrels were where they belonged, at the feet of the boy they had never been able to kill. The Eastern commander said that Bay had gotten to the northern border when he was only 8 years old and had reached the warrior rank in 1 month, so a Ning family fighter couldn't compare to him. This information was a real blow to the patriarch, who now finally realized that the young man in front of him could be a serious problem. Meanwhile, the commander continued. According to him, Bay reached the level of war god when he was 17, at which time he was granted the title of who was on a god of war level. Obviously, no one wanted to believe Bay had that kind of strength, because then he'd be a serious threat, and nobody was in the mood for that. Except our hero wasn't going to waste his time asking these folks what they wanted. He let his power fill the hall, forcing those he wanted to obliterate to kneel. Now these scoundrels were exactly where they belonged, beneath the boy they had never been able to take down. The Eastern commander stated that Bay had made it to the northern border by the tender age beneath the boy they had never been able to take down. The Eastern commander stated that Bay had made it to the northern border by the tender age of 8 and had achieved warrior status in just 1 month, so a Ning family fighter didn't stand a chance against him. This news hit the patriarch like a ton of bricks, and he finally grasped that the young man in front of him could be a serious issue. Meanwhile, the commander continued. Allegedly, Bay reached the war god tier when he was 17 and earned the title of King of the North. Could be a serious issue. Meanwhile, the commander continued. Allegedly, Bay reached the war god tier when he was 17 and earned the title of King of the North. But he preferred to go by just an ordinary dude. Mrs. Hongland could only imagine the kind of hell her son had gone through during his long years on the northern frontier. With a warm smile, the boy began reassuring his mom that he was perfectly okay. Stepping forward, Bay reminisced about that rainy night 13 years ago when his granddad was taken out by the current patriarch right there in that very room. And his fourth uncle, Ning Kong Hai, had shanked him right in the heart just for helping him escape and thus keeping him alive. He witnessed it all firsthand, and despite being just a kid, those events were etched in his memory like a bad tattoo. His granddad defended him until his last breath. His uncle treated him like his own flesh and blood. So now Ba wouldn't let go of that grudge until he got his payback. The patriarch suddenly realized that his free reign was over, and it was time to pay the piper for all his wrongdoings. All he could plead for was mercy. But mercy was the last thing on the table. After all, Ning Changgu had tried to wipe out his entire family, so there was no point in even trying to ask for mercy. Drawing his sword from its sheath, the boy added that if it hadn't been for the Su family's grandma helping him escape, he would have been history at the hands of his enemies ages ago. To our hero, it was crystal clear that there were no innocents in the Ning family. Each of them had a hand in bringing down his parents. Instead of using the blade, Ba tossed it to the ground. The sword sank into the floorboards. As the patriarch gazed at the lethal steel, he spotted his own terrified reflection. He now comprehended that karma had finally decided to pay him a visit. Desperate to cling to life, the man lunged for the sword, hoping it would transform into a shield. But when he touched the hilt, the old man found it was as if the sword had fused with the ground. The boy watched these futile attempts to lift the sword. Unable to hide his grin, he told him that the sword of the King of the North weighed 360 kilograms. So good luck lifting that baby. Ning Bay himself effortlessly seized his weapon, swung it, and finally did the thing he had dreamed about for ages, taking down the one who'd messed up his life. And just when it dawned on everyone that the big shot was toast, one of the old-timers in the family threw down the gauntlet and said he'd duel the kid to the death. But before he could finish that dramatic flare, our dude had already skewered him with his sword, leaving him as he gazed at the bodies of the folks he loathed with every fiber of his being. Ba whispered softly that his granddad and uncle could finally kick back and rest in peace. Meanwhile, the Ning family members were so scared stiff they couldn't even squeak out a word. They were just praying their lives wouldn't get snatched away. As he ambled towards Ning Chang, the young man muttered about how he'd stay there on his knees for the rest of his life to relive his father's humiliation and his mother's sorrow. Then he whipped around to his dad and dropped the bombshell that from that moment on, all of the Ning family loot was officially his, since he was supposed to be leading the family all along. The parents were struck dumb just gaping at him. He told them he needed to pay a visit to his fourth uncle's grave and asked them to stick around. Stepping outside, the dude noticed the weather was just like it was 13 years ago. But oh boy, everything felt different. He wasn't the punching bag anymore. A few minutes later, a car rolled up to the house and honked at Bay like it was his personal taxi. The commander of the West Loogie stepped forward and asked who decided to show up. Without a word, a man hopped out of the car and swung open the door for the old guy. The elderly gentleman said he wanted a word with the young man who had been ghosted by the Ning family 13 years back. He was curious to see how tough this kid had gotten since he dared to pull such a stunt. More folks started piling out of the car surrounding Bay and his crew. Lugway, feeling all heroic, drew his sword, declaring he was ready to clear the way for the King of the North. But the southern commander, Guo Bifong, calmed him down, reminding him that there were no invaders lurking in Dragon City, unlike the northern border. The boys soon figured out that another car belonged to someone from the Su family. Before long, Grandma Su stepped out with Chinny, dutifully holding an umbrella for her like she was royalty. The guy escorting the old lady said they had nothing to fear from this ancient lady. After all, the Su family was about as relevant as yesterday's news. But the old lady's opinions didn't quite match up. She smirked and asked if Mr. Ling had come to congratulate the patriarch of the Ning family on his so-called happiness. The old man shot back that he'd never cheer for someone who took out his own big brother. He pointed a finger at Bay and said the kid had messed up his oldest grandson, so he wanted the supposed patriarch to own up to it. There was a young guy lounging by the car with a bright red mark on his cheek, who chimed in that he got slapped by the commander of East China. Laughing, the warrior asked if they really expected to hold Ning Fukuo accountable, since he was pushing up daisies and not likely to have a chat with anyone who wasn't good at necromancy. The old man looked floored. He could hardly wrap his head around the news that Fukuo had kicked the bucket on his 80th birthday. Grandma Su then chimed in, claiming she could handle business with Mr. Liang's grandson and suggested he should head home before he got drenched in the rain. The old dude was silent. He wanted to figure out what was up. After all, Lady Su had sent him home for a reason. He also really wanted to locate that kid. There was this young dude chilling next to his car with a bright red mark on his cheek. He claimed he got smacked by the commander of East China. The warrior chuckled and wondered if they really wanted to pin anything on Ning Fukuo since you know he's dead, and all probably wouldn't make for a very effective conversation partner unless you were into necromancy. This revelation out of the blue, Grandma Su jumped into the chat saying she could sort things out with Mr. Liang's grandson so the kid could hightail it home and dodge the downpour. The old man went silent, deep in thought. He needed to piece together what was happening. After all, Lady Su had sent him back home for a reason, plus he really wanted to track down that kid. The old dude was all hush-hush. He was itching to crack the mystery of what was happening. After all, Lady Su had booted him from the party for a reason, and boy was he curious about that kid. From the Ning family, who looked like he was the mastermind behind all this mayhem. In his mind, the only escape plan was to hightail it away from the hurricane of drama brewing up ahead. The son trailing behind his patriarch was fuming, yelling that hitting Shaolin was like poking a bear. It was personal, and forgiveness was not on the menu. As she crept a little closer, Lady Su nudged Mr. Liang, urging him to play it smart. She reminded him that his family had been stacking their dough for over a century, so there was no sense in tossing it all away for a reckless move. Liang had no interest in being told what to do, so he just thanked the old lady for her concern. Still, he was itching for some kind of revenge on whoever had laid a hand on his grandson Ning Bay. Stepping up, he declared that the culprit they were hunting was his little brother, and he had no intention of ratting him out. In a situation like this, Patriarch Liang wasn't above flexing some resources to get what he wanted. He decided to send Liang Fi Dao, the muscle of the bunch, to negotiate with these brats. Seeing this guy, Qin had him shaking in his boots for Ba's safety. I mean, come on, the fourth toughest fighter around was a big deal in this town. Grandma gave her granddaughter some solid advice to chill a bit because her fiancé had sworn to protect her and he always keeps his promises. Grinning at the girl, our hero proclaimed that today he'd teach her about the hierarchy in the martial arts world. According to him, first were the newbies who were practically average Joes, then came the rookie-level fighters. Now these guys had some serious power, followed by the ranks of warriors, generals, and the ultimate god of war. Once Bay activated his juicy powers, he revealed that the god of war was marked by a fierce aura that could send entire armies scurrying. No biggie. With this power in his pocket, he aimed to shield those he cared for. For Chinhee, these weren't just empty words. She could feel her affections for this guy warming up fast. Naturally, our hero didn't skip over the fact that he had over 100 gods of war at his beck and call on the northern frontier. At this point, Liang Feda was sweating bullets because he knew those words were no joke. He was up against a formidable foe, and there was no way out. The gods of war were not all created equal. Right now, Ning Bay was the top dog in the northern border garrison. There was a good reason they called him a king. With a flick of his wrist, he could send enemies running for the hills, desperate to escape his fury. The force of his attack slammed into his opponent's chest, launching him back several meters. Now the guy was sprawled out next to his family, barely able to move. They were in shock, because nobody ever took down their main fighter that easily. This dude made Feda cough up blood without even laying a finger on him. Hearing the ruckus, Ning Kanlin sauntered out, grinning smugly, saying if he had known Uncle Liang was visiting, he would have rolled out the red carpet. The old man was taken aback, hardly believing it. His old buddy had returned to the Ning family and was rocking the patriarch role. Meanwhile, Cannon played it off, claiming his son was a little rusty on etiquette, so he wanted to smooth things over and get the guests settled in the main hall. Mr. Leung felt a smidge more at ease after hearing that. He chuckled dryly, pointing out that at least one person in the Ning family still had some manners. Following that remark, the old man, along with his son and guards, made his way to the front door. Walking into the main hall, the first thing that caught the Liang family members' attention was the overwhelming number of armed folks. They were uneasy, clueless about the Ning family's game plan. As they strode into the center of the hall, they spotted Kanggu himself kneeling there. He didn't even flinch, as if he'd truly accepted his humbling fate. No one spoke up yet. It was clear that the guys were baffled to see Kanga in this position, given he was the one who used to run the show in this house. But boy, how the tides had turned. Even a tough martial artist could bring those who once ruled to kneel and make them bleed. Old man Liang had a lightbulb moment when he realized he'd messed up by ignoring Lady Su. It was obvious that the Ning dynasty had undergone a massive shakeup. As the evening progressed and things got livelier, Ning Bay suggested Nana should take a seat that was a bit more cushy and fitting for her status. Mr. Liang was stressing hard about being treated like just another guest stuck on a plain old chair. Meanwhile, the old lady found a more prominent seat and instructed her granddaughter to fetch Aunt Ching. Trying to wrap his head around it all, old man Liang asked Handlin if he actually decided to return to the family after all those years. Lady Su chimed in with a grin, explaining that he didn't just come back. He'd become the shiny new head of the Ning family and the top patriarch. That was a lot to digest. For a second, the elderly gentleman was left speechless. Ning Kanlin timidly mumbled that he didn't think he had any standout talents, so he really hoped the elders would back him. Not waiting for any responses, he then introduced his oldest son, Ning Bay. Stumbling over his own words, the old gentleman said he was pleased to meet such a promising young man. Sensing a chance to poke fun at the flatterer old lady, Su reminded him there were plenty of rising stars in his own family too. But hey, he had officially become the new head of the Ning family and the chief patriarch. All this was happening too fast. The poor elderly guy was utterly stunned. Ning Kanlin sheepishly blurted that he had no special skills, hoping the elders would throw him a lifeline. Without waiting for a response, he proudly introduced his eldest son, Ning Bay. Grinning awkwardly, the elderly gentleman said he was delighted to finally meet such a commendable young man. Trying to stir the pot, old lady Sue reminded him there were also plenty of promising young men in his family's younger generation. The elderly gentleman said he was glad to meet a worthy young man. Trying to poke at this flatterer old lady, Sue reminded him that there were also plenty of bright young stars in the next generation of his own family. Coughing, Liang grumbled that compared to young Bay, everyone else was a total embarrassment to the family. All that drama needed some serious alone time to stew over, so the old guy got up from his chair and announced he was heading home since it was getting super late. Nobody stopped him or tried to block his exit. The guy with him strolled out of the house like it was just another day. As they ambled down the street, the old man wouldn't stop yammering, convinced that Dragon City was on the brink of transformation since the black sheep of the Ning family had made his grand return. Ning Bay trailed behind Liang. His father excitedly grilled him about where he was headed at such an odd hour. He promised it would be a quick trip, just needed to swing by the graves. Soon enough, he reached the cemetery, and as he approached Ning Kanan's grave, found that someone had swiped his ashes. Ba was livid. He couldn't believe that even in death his loved ones weren't allowed to chill in peace. He decided it was high time to launch an investigation to figure out who the culprits were and where the ashes had vanished. This was one twisted crime. Young Quan and his buddies thought they better chat with the cemetery caretaker. Maybe the cameras caught something shady. The worker was caught off guard by their unexpected late-night visit. Central Blade revealed that 2 graves in the northeast corner had been cleaned out. Someone had made off with the ashes of Ning Kang Nan and Ning Kan Shan. The caretaker was freaking out and nearly babbling that he didn't know anything. His freaked-out reaction seemed kinda suspicious. It looked like somebody did a bang-up job of intimidating him. Zhang Kuang didn't want to waste time with this, so he decided to play the tough card instead. He dramatically pulled a blade from its sheath and demanded he think harder. The caretaker dropped to his knees, begging for his life, suddenly recalling that a young couple had come by 7 years ago and had taken the ashes. Getting any kind of info was a win, but Central Blade was determined to dig deeper. This made the poor guy start to cry. He didn't want to get mixed up in this mess, but those shady folks had paid him over 100,000 for his silence. The intimidation approach switched to some encouragement as they threw a bank card in front of him. Young Quan promised he'd get the same amount if he spilled the beans. Meanwhile, Ning Bay stood by the empty grave, mentally vowing to unleash a world of hurt on whoever messed with the Ning family, dead or alive. Finally, getting close to the caretaker, Central Blade asked if he had figured out what happened. Handing him some papers, Mr. Zhang revealed that 7 years back, a young couple had taken ashes from these graves. The caretaker recognized them without any hassle and quickly gave a description. Twisting his head, our hero ordered that an artist be found pronto to sketch out their faces. When these thieves were caught, he made it clear there was no mercy to be shown. The guy also asked him to tell Muang to use his connections in North China to speed things up. His buddies were all revved up and ready to roll. They needed to find the bad guys quickly and make sure they got what was coming to them. Even though it was late and the weather was miserable, the lights in the Ning's house stayed on. The new head of the family sat in his study, drowning in piles of important documents. Ning Kanland had never pictured himself as the patriarch, and dealing with this role was like trying to juggle flaming torches. He tiptoed into the room. He suggested his father call it a night since the day had been a roller coaster. Spotting the financial reports in his father's hands, he asked if there were any issues with the Ning family finances. Khan replied that things were a lot worse than what you'd think. After skimming through the papers, he realized the family business was tanking hard. The company's shares were mortgaged and debts were closing in on 1 million. But none of this freaked out BAE at all. He grinned and sweetly pleaded for his father to let him take care of it. Their heartwarming chat was interrupted by Chin, who insisted their son shouldn't bear all the family burdens. The young man waved off her concerns and, eager to switch topics, asked why Chin had chosen to stick around. With a smile, she replied that her grandma wanted her to discuss something with Auntie Ching Hong Lang, but Mom was adamant about her son not brushing off her advice. So she reiterated that he shouldn't stress because the current patriarch was set to tackle the financial troubles. Ning Bay needed to make it crystal clear that he'd have all this sorted out way fast. Picking up the phone, he made a call, but the voice on the other end said the president was already knocked out for the night and should be called back tomorrow. Bay couldn't let that slide. He ordered the president to be jolted awake and told that he was urgently needed by a common man from the northern border. Listening to her son's tone, Mrs. Hong Lang awkwardly mentioned that he had quite the rude way of asking for help. But the father was more curious not about how he sounded, but rather about who his son was chumming around with. So without missing a beat, he asked who he was on the line with. Bay simply said it was just a friend of his. To dodge any more questions, the young man mentioned he needed to raid the kitchen for a late-night snack before catching some Z's. After going through the documents, he found the family business was in desperate shape. The shares were tied up, and debts were nearing $1 million. But BAE wasn't even bothered by it. He grinned and asked warmly for his father to let him handle everything. Their discussion was cut short by Chin, who walked in. She felt like their son shouldn't be taking on all the family's drama. The young man shrugged off her words and, wanting to pivot the subject, asked why Chin decided to stick around. With a smile, she replied her grandma wanted her to chat with Auntie Ching Hong Lang, but her mother insisted she couldn't ignore her advice. So she once again said he didn't need to worry because the new patriarch would manage the financial woes. Ning Bay had to clarify that this was nothing he wouldn't sort out quickly. Picking up the phone, he rang up but was told the president was already asleep and should call back tomorrow. Bay was having none of that. He insisted the president be woken up immediately and told that a common man from the northern border needed him right away. After hearing her son say that, Mrs. Hong Lang awkwardly pointed out that the way he was asking for help wasn't polite. But the father was much more interested not in the how, but rather the whom he was talking to, so he instantly asked who he was calling. Bay replied that it was just one of his acquaintances. To dodge any more probing, the young man claimed he'd be off to the kitchen for a midnight snack before hitting the hay. Mrs. Hong Lang awkwardly noted he was asking for help in a rather unsophisticated manner, but the dad was more interested in figuring out not how, but with whom his son was hanging out. So he jumped right in and asked who he was on the phone with. Bay replied it was just a buddy of his. To dodge more questions, the young man declared he was off to the kitchen because he was craving a midnight snack before hitting the hay. Observing Ning Bay's antics, Chin-hee found herself utterly flabbergasted. How on earth could someone be so spoiled? She was convinced that after such rude requests, nobody would want to extend a helping hand to him. But the girl quickly realized she was way off base when the phone rang. Everyone was completely taken aback that Ba received a call back. And it wasn't just any call, but a video call. When Colin picked up, he was greeted by a friendly guy sporting a big grin. Shin Hai immediately recognized him, and let's just say her jaw hit the floor in disbelief. Standing there was none other than the richest man in the world, Xiao Yi. Who would have thought Ning Bay would casually dial up the wealthiest dude, referring to him as just an acquaintance? Zhao Shi finally broke the awkward silence, asking who he was lucky enough to be chatting with. Kellen jumped in, explaining that the call was from his son, Ning Bay, who was currently busy, but would call back later. However, the man, looking pretty tense, insisted he was absolutely free right now and could totally wait. Just then, Beat trotted into the room with a fruit platter in his hands. His dad quickly urged him, saying Mr. Chow was on the line. The rich guy addressed Bay as Your Majesty. Without skipping a beat, the kid shot back, asking him not to call him that, especially while he's at home. It was clear that Mr. Chow was sweating bullets, immediately launching into excuses about how his phone was acting up. If it were working properly, he would have picked up right away. But Bay brushed it off with a shrug. He casually reminded the guy about a favor he owed him. Turns out 3 years ago, he had saved Mr. Chow and his entire family, so naturally he was ready to fulfill any request Bay threw his way. Instantly, everyone understood why the wealthy man had so much respect for Ning Bay. With a grin, our hero stated he needed a tad bit of cash. Turning to his dad, he asked exactly how much dough they needed to settle all their debts. Candlin felt a mix of nerves while mentioning that the Ning family owed $8 billion in principal debt, plus a few short-term loans. But Chong Shi didn't bat an eye at the number. He pledged to give $10 billion, adding that it wasn't even close to what Bay had done for him. Then, he mentioned that if that amount wasn't enough, he was totally game to throw in more. When everyone realized that it was in dollar bills, their jaws dropped because the figure was simply mind-boggling. Kynlin modestly stated that if they were talking about dollars, they didn't need anything more than $2 billion, so there was really no reason for the man to part with such a gigantic gift. Chio was utterly stunned at this revelation, but even more so when he heard that as soon as the Ning family got through their rough patch, they would start paying him back. After thinking it over for a moment, Mr. Chow said that the family didn't have to repay anything because he wanted to give them a gift, but the patriarch insisted that the sum was too hefty to just accept as a present. With that, the conversation wrapped up. Canlin admired how generous Mr. Chow was, but his son knew the man was simply a shrewd businessman. Of course, he kept that opinion to himself because everyone was in a good mood, and he was finally ready to catch some Z's. Finally, the young man turned to Chinhee, confirming if she really had a test tomorrow. The girl looked confused and asked how he knew. Instead of answering, Bass gave the young lady a stern reminder to hit the sack early, promising to give her a ride to the training facility the next day. Morning rolled around, and our hero, of course, kept his word. He, being the gentleman he is, picked up his lady and whisked her off to the right spot. The driver swung open the door for her, and she smiled with gratitude. Her friend then bolted up to her eyebrows raised, asking in shock why she was riding in the Ning family's car. The stranger's eyes then scrutinized Ba, who was chilling in the front seat. The shy girl quickly averted her gaze and whispered to her friend, asking what kind of handsome dude was giving her a lift. Shinhai didn't know how to respond, so her acquaintance speculated that it had to be the same Ning Bay she'd been engaged to since childhood. When the young lady remained tight-lipped, her inquisitive friend pressed on, asking which university Ning Bay himself was attending. Our hero wasn't a big fan of talking himself up, but this time he shared that he wasn't in a regular university. He was at Bailey Military Academy. A passing student couldn't help but burst out in shock at the mention of that school. The girls asked if he knew anything about it. One student chimed in, claiming it was a third-rate academy that was practically worthless, while his buddy insisted that was pure baloney because his brother studied there. Hearing this, the blonde simply grinned and sarcastically remarked that his brother was the real hope of their village, so they should definitely throw a prayer of thanks for getting such disrespect was ridiculous and downright outrageous. So the alumni from that very academy, Balian, hopped out of the car. Everything about Ning Bay, from his stare to his stride, said that he wasn't in the mood for a friendly chat with anyone who dared to diss the institution that shaped him. Shinhee knew things wouldn't end well if her so-called fiancé was itching for a fight again. She decided it was high time to step in and prevent a brawl. Approaching the guy, the young lady asked if he wasn't running late to get home. Our hero quickly caught on that he was being politely nudged out the door. The blonde-haired student was not amused, glaring at the couple with discontent. He had been trying forever to win Chinhee over, so this was not sitting well with him. He believed he should be offered some serious gratitude for getting him into the academy. Such disrespect was totally uncalled for and absolutely ridiculous. So the graduate from that very academy, Balian, hopped out of the car. Everything about Ning Bay, from his intense glare to his swagger, screamed that he wasn't in the mood for a chit-chat with someone who dared to diss the prestigious school that shaped him. Shinhee sensed trouble brewing since her so-called fiancé was once again looking for a fight. She decided to step in to avert a showdown. Approaching the guy, the young lady asked if he wasn't running a little late getting home. Our hero immediately picked up on the vibe that she was pushing him away. The blonde-haired student sulked as he glanced at the couple, feeling dejected. He had been pining after Chinhee for quite some time, so things weren't looking bright for him. The appearance of the so-called fiancé. Noticing Ning Bei's feisty attitude, he swaggered over, introduced himself as Shu Zhangxiang, and sheepishly apologized for his words, claiming he had never even heard of Blayong Academy. The young man didn't say a word. He didn't even bother to shake hands with his new acquaintance. Talk about disrespect. This snub left the student feeling awkward. He was trying to play peacemaker to avoid any drama, but his efforts fell flat. Instead, he got the cheeky response that clueless folks like him didn't need to know about a fancy military academy. Those comments really ticked off Chinhee's friend. After all, she was in the same clueless boat, completely unaware that such an academy even existed. A kid with a brother there mentioned that Balian got accepted at 16, and after 5 long years of training, they graduated as officers. Grinning, Riley added humorously. Shu Jinxiang asked about Ba's rank in the academy. He casually replied he was just your average Joe. Pleased with this answer, the blonde smirked, thinking his buddy was just pretending to be a badass combat officer, when in reality he was merely a joker messing with everyone. Chinhee wasn't fazed by those words. words. She shot back that Ning Bay wasn't lying, and he definitely wouldn't con anyone like a regular student. Naturally, Ba felt flattered by the girl's high opinion of him, but he brushed it off, claiming that the petty clown's words couldn't faze him. She should head to class while he planned to pick her up later. When she asked what his agenda was for the day, he grinned and remarked he might just eliminate one of his enemies. Shu Shang Shan thought that was a real bad punchline, so he called the guy a total nutcase. Little did he know, that was pretty spot on. B had become just that when people acted invincible and took too many liberties. Spotting the shift in the boy's expression, Chin-hee tried to lighten the mood by reminding him he'd promised Auntie Ching not to throw any punches. Ning Bay remembered that promise all too well, but his glare on that blonde dude was still full of rage as he tried to confirm whether this family member was really from the Shay clan. Young Xiang flashed a toothy grin and muttered that it was best not to mess with his family. Ignoring the implied threat, our hero told the arrogant punk to let Shir Kwania know they'd be expecting the family at 8 o'clock tonight. The request seemed downright ridiculous to the blonde. He thought this kid was out of his mind if he honestly believed his older uncle would want anything to do with him. Ning Bay was already on edge, and he didn't bother to rein in his powers as they surged forth. One swat of his hand sent poor Shi Jingxiang crashing to the ground. The shoulder that bore the brunt of the hit was screaming in pain, making it impossible for him to stand. He covered his face with his hands, wishing he could just inform Chin-hee that her fiancé was at it again, despite the man doing everything possible to get what he had coming to him. Before she could voice her outrage at the scene, the guy hopped in his car and sped away like it was a getaway. He was off to his old stomping grounds, which used to feel like home years ago, but now it felt totally alien. Upon arrival, he was greeted by his beaming mother, and that made Ba think maybe he could reclaim this place as his home again. The woman expressed distress about their relative kneeling in the middle of the house all night. After all, he was Ba's uncle, and she felt it was time for him to go. However, her son had a different opinion. This man had tried to take their lives, so he wasn't keen on letting that scoundrel off the hook. He then revealed he had already picked his next target for revenge. That target was Ching Fang. Looking at his mother's shocked expression, the boy inched closer and defiantly asked if she planned on stopping him. The car zoomed down the road, fueled by the haunting memories of that dreadful night. Before Ning Bay's eyes, the image of his mother, tears streaming down her face as she pounded on the locked doors, begging for her child's safety, replayed over and over. Even the little one sensed that her pleas were futile. She tried to intervene. Her companions insisted they needed to bail, since their enemies were drawing near, and begging these traitors for help was pointless. Yet it was tough for Ching Hong Long to process that the people she loved and thought were family didn't want to lend a hand. She simply couldn't bring herself to leave. It took her husband's brother to scoop her up and usher her to the car. The moment they turned their backs on the front door, it swung open like someone from the Ching family had decided to lend a hand. But nope, it was some lowlife who knifed the defenseless Ning Kong right in the back. His brother expected anything, but this treacherous blow was the last thing he could ever imagine. The vile relative of his wife had zero guilt about this heinous act. Ironically, he seemed to revel in the misery he'd inflicted. This brutal scene unfolded before Ning Bay's eyes, leaving an indelible mark on his memory. He craved vengeance and finally had the means to avenge so his uncle's spirit could rest. His car rolled up to the very gate his mother had desperately pounded on 13 years ago, but instead of assistance, they received yet another crushing blow. The moment the Ning family's car pulled up, the guards scrambled to fling open the door as quickly as they could. Ba figured it was time they made themselves useful that very night. Everything was simmering with fury, but he tried to hold it together since revenge is best served ice cold. A quick takedown wouldn't even come close to satisfying him, but man keeping his cool was like holding back a hurricane, especially when that rainy night popped back into his head like a bad song you can't shake. The fiery red doors of his grandpa's house were as tightly shut as a clam. In the back seat sat his folks, looking like they were melting under the pressure. You could see how hard they were struggling to hold it together. His mom practically teared up mentioning how Cannon got taken out right there. But now the Ning family's ride was being greeted like royalty, except Bay and his folks totally weren't feeling that kind of reception. They were hungry for revenge. When nobody hopped out of the car after a hot minute, one of the guys in the front approached and sweet-talked the guest to step inside. The tinted window slid down, and Bay signaled that he was waiting for the big cheese of the house to come and open the door himself. Neither the butler nor the other staff recognized the dude behind the wheel. To them, he looked too young for such VIP treatment. The gentleman was turning red as a tomato since he had no clue who was sitting there, but he was ready to swing those doors open for his guests. Ning's parents shot glances towards someone who was starting to piece together who had rolled into their driveway. One of the Ching brothers was flabbergasted that after all those years, he was staring at a sister in the flesh who should have been a ghost by now. Xing Hong Lang was not thrilled to see her second brother, the family traitor, who wore his betrayal like a badge. He was quick to say he didn't consider himself her brother anymore because she'd long been kicked out of their family tree. What a turn of events. Just a second ago, they were all smiles, but now the gloves were off, and the dirtbag ordered the unwanted guests to bounce ASAP. Ning Bay jumped out of the car and asked why the dear relatives were in such a rush to boot them. Was it guilt weighing them down? Those words barely scratched the guy who just reminded him that the Qing family was one of the 7 richest clans in Dragon City, so they never regretted their actions. Ning Yang wasn't bothered one bit. He told them that his wife's relatives would be reversing their statements in no time. After saying this, he handed his brother Hong Gan a folder and demanded he read what was inside pronto. Not waiting for the creep to gather himself, he grabbed his wife's stroller and declared they'd wait inside. A quick glance at the document made Qing Tenshin's jaw drop. His worried sister-in-law leaned in, asking what kind of top-secret loot he had. The second brother spilled that it was their contract with the Ning conglomerate. The head of the house was totally baffled about how these folks got their paws on the contract and why they were cruising around in the Ning family ride. Instead of clarity, they were told to read that document cover to cover and sign it to break the contract. The room erupted with indignation. Chintenyan boldly declared that their family had put tons of effort into this deal, so nobody was going to dare to break it. He slammed his finger on the document and shouted that every single resource of the Ning family had been invested in this partnership. The second brother snapped back, saying Canlin and his clan had no authority to nullify the contract. Now was the moment he'd been waiting for. He could announce he was the new head of the Ning conglomerate, giving him all the power cards to play. His wife's brother confidently claimed the patriarch of the Ning family was Kai, and he sure as heck wasn't ready to hand over his throne to Canlin. He whipped out his phone, saying he would call in for backup to sort this all out. Ning Bay didn't stop him and slyly pointed out how there was no chance of getting through to Kan Hai. He let his uncle reach that conclusion all by himself. Of course, when the call went unanswered, it was clear being dead kinda put a damper on answering the phone. So Tenshin thought he'd try his luck with Ning Fuji. No dice there either, so the next one on his list was Ning Kang. Maybe he could at least shed some light on this whole mess. Finally, after what felt like forever, the call was picked up. Tenshin immediately started grilling Kongu about what went down at Ning's abode. The dude's voice came through like a whisper, barely holding it together. As he listened to the wild tale of Ning Bay crashing the patriarch's birthday bash, Mr. Qing's eyes widened like saucers in surprise. It was almost unbelievable that the rogue behind this madness was Ning Bay, the same kid who had flopped at the kill 13 years ago. What was even creepier was the frantic warning from a strong warrior like Kongu about not provoking this guy. It left everyone scratching their heads about what could make one of Dragon City's top 10 fighters sweat bullets. Ning Onglen's patience was on the verge of exploding. He demanded the head of the Qing family sign the papers to terminate their partnership. Honestly, the men were totally bewildered. They had no clue what to do next. The older brother's wife decided it was time for some smooth talking and crafty maneuvering, so she sidled up to Hong Gan and reminded him they were family, so he should ask her husband not to send them spiraling into bankruptcy. Unfortunately, Ba's mother had not forgotten all the heartache her so-called family had dished out, so attempting to pull the pity card was way past due. Ning Onglan recalled using all the Ning family's resources to lift the Qing dynasty from obscurity to becoming one of the top 7 powerhouses when he and Hong Gong tied the knot. Now can you believe it? The mastermind of all this madness was none other than Ning Bay, the same kid who couldn't finish the job 13 years ago. But what really sent chills down spines was the warning from a bold warrior like Kangu, who spoke with a hint of panic in his voice about not riling this guy up. It was incomprehensible concern. What could terrify one of the top 10 fighters in Dragon City like that? Ning Anglin's patience was starting to wear thin. He demanded that the head of the Qing family sign the papers to cut ties. Honestly, those guys were utterly bewildered. They were at a loss about what action to take. The older brother's wife decided to play the long game and went up to Honggan. She gently reminded her that they were family, so she should have a little chat with her husband and kindly ask him not to lead them straight into financial ruin. But let's be real, Ba's mom wasn't exactly holding a grudge against her family for no reason, so pity time was officially over. Ning Anglan remembered that when he tied the knot with Hong Ong, he pulled every string he could at the Ning family to elevate their little operation to one of those 7 big-shot families of the Qing dynasty. Now was hell-bent on getting back everything he had ever lent to these lousy folks who ghosted him when he needed them the most. The 2 brothers stood there, scratching their heads in pure bewilderment, as a third brother waltzed in and demanded they sign some paperwork. This was the infamous Qin Fen, the guy who had ruthlessly taken out Kangan, and now he ranked #1 on BA's revenge list. The guy mentioned that the Ning family wasn't exactly swimming in wealth either. They had thrown more than 10 billion into the new neighborhood and were reeling from huge losses. Kangan's executioner figured that this family was under massive pressure, and without their backing, they were toast. Ben claimed the new neighborhood was like a bottomless pit just gulping down cash. So wouldn't it just be easier if they went belly up, except that the property was still under their name, meaning guests could chill there? These gems of wisdom didn't shock Candlin one bit, who responded that everything the Qing family had was detailed in that document. Finally, the third brother took a good look at the paper in his hands, and after skimming it, he could barely spit out a word. Regaining his composure, the man shouted that the Ning family were the real bloodsuckers. Nodding along, Kanlan parroted that they absolutely were, and they were out to serve some payback. One of the brothers piped up and mentioned they had forked over more than 6 billion to this venture, yet the profits from those 2 tiny projects were barely hitting 2 billion, but Fangi was adamant that his brother sign the contract right away. He believed that the Liang family could turn into solid partners once all 3 projects wrapped up, which would be just enough to pay off the bank loan. After catching wind of that reasoning, the brothers began to think signing the document might not be such a bad idea, crossing their fingers that their family wouldn't wind up in a financial hole. While the Qing brothers were hovering over the document, Candlin's phone buzzed with a call from Xiaoxi. He was all over the place and didn't know what move to make until his son, chuckling, gave him the nudge to answer. Hearing that name, the Qing men couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that the richest guy in the room was calling. They thought Can couldn't possibly know people like that. Boy, were they wrong, mister. After Nin picked up a call from a big-time businessman who politely asked if he was interrupting anything important. Ba's dad replied that he was absolutely free and was curious about what Mr. Chow wanted to discuss. Rich beamed and said that the board had unanimously decided to invest in the Ning family. This news hit the new head of the family like a ton of bricks. He thought they were just getting a little lifeboat, but nope, they were aiming high. Xiaoxi announced that his company was ready to drop $10 billion for a 10% stake in the Ning Empire. If this was a cause for celebration for the Ning family, the Qing guys were flabbergasted, barely able to form coherent sentences amidst their shock. Canlin couldn't believe someone could be this generous. It felt like a heavenly gift tailored just for all the suffering his family had endured. But then, Ning Bay jumped into the convo and said sternly that 10% was simply too much. Spotting the King of the North in the phone booth, everyone in Xiaoxi's office jumped to their feet and bowed down like they were meeting royalty. The Qing family was puzzled, trying to figure out what the richest man on the planet had to do with Canaan. Ning Bay's comment was overheard, and Mr. Chao said they'd agree to 5%. Honestly, even 1% would have worked for them. But the patriarch settled on 5%, sealing the deal. Sure, Bay could have hustled for sweeter terms, but if his dad was happy, that made him happy too. Everyone in Chao's office was all smiles. They weren't losing sleep over stocks and money. The biggest win was that their company now had a direct line to the King of the North. Once one of the brothers finally found his voice, he questioned if they really thought they could take down the Qing dynasty. Money couldn't solve everything. There were still some badass martial artists around. Grinning Bay reminded him that Qing Funger was just that kind of master. Turning to his folks, he suggested they take a stroll around the estate. They were a bit hesitant to leave, knowing an act of violence could be just around the corner. Spoiler alert, it was. Ning Bay felt he had to teach his rivals a lesson, so the young man tapped into his powers, and suddenly a strong wind blasted through the room. The powerful energy had the Qing brothers huddling together in fear. They never saw a young guy wield such force before. It knocked them right off their feet, and all they could do was try to keep their heads above water. The brothers were shaking in their boots, realizing the martial artist in front of them was the real deal. The guy noticed the light bulb moment hitting his foes as they pieced together who stood before them. Now he couldn't help but wear a smug smile. King Tenshin finally saw why Kanggu had warned that this young man should never be messed with. After all, he was strong and powerful. With his backing, the Ning family could soar to new heights. Feeling someone else's might was an unsettling first for Feng, so he concluded that he needed to deal with this dangerous opponent ASAP. As the young man turned away, his uncle snatched his sword and decided to launch a surprise attack from behind. He always enjoyed taking people out when they had their guard down. He was already swinging that blade, picturing the deadly steel connecting. Experiencing someone else's power was a fresh new twist for Feng, and let's just say, he wasn't exactly living for it. He figured he should probably handle this dangerous adversary before they turned it into a one-man show. So the kid flipped around, when out of nowhere his uncle unsheathed his sword, plotting a sneaky little assault from behind. He loved to catch people off guard, surprise, surprise. He was already swinging and could practically taste the steel meeting flesh. The life of this cheeky kid who thought he was the next big thing. But when it came time to swing his sword, he froze like a deer in headlights right before it should have met his opponent's skin. Swiveling his head, our hero declared he wouldn't let Fang Yi off the hook, especially not by using the same dirty trick that took his uncle down. It was beyond disgusting to even look at someone willing to commit such a sleazy act just to score brownie points with the Ning family. The kid's face was stone cold when he let loose his power and took out someone who didn't deserve to breathe the same air as the rest of us. Finally, after 13 long years of waiting, justice was served in the blink of an eye. Poor murderer didn't even get a chance to utter his last words. After that, our hero figured he'd had enough family bonding for one day, so he turned on his heels and strode out of the house. Even after he left the mansion, his uncles were shaking in their boots, realizing they were face to face with the very god of war from the northern garrison. And when the Ning family finally made it back home, the butler greeted them with news that such Qing Hong had arrived. Ba's parents welcomed the guest warmly, and he grinned as he announced he had a little something for Auntie Qing. Hongland was pleased as punch, even though she said gifts weren't necessary since the lad was practically family. Catching the gaze aimed at Ning Bay, the parents sensed it was time for the boys to hash out some important stuff. So they decided to leave the boys to it, letting them tackle whatever was on their minds. Being the perfect host, he invited his guests to sit down and casually wondered if the Su family was facing any hiccups. Getting comfy suing. Hong mentioned that while his family wasn't as strong as they used to be, they could handle their own problems just fine. This pleased our hero, as it revealed that he was sitting across from a man used to standing on his own 2 feet. The guest was sure the Ning family was knee-deep in trouble. He offered them 300 million, but only if they called off the engagement with Shin He. To back that up, he handed Ning Bay a bank card loaded with cash. Bay took the card and snapped it in half like a twig. Then he made it clear it was time for his guest to hit the road. Qing Hong was none too happy about this. He tried to plead his case, saying he had spent his whole life in the northern garrison and didn't have a clue about what his so-called fiancée liked. After listening to this passionate spiel, the boy didn't argue. He just wanted to know why they were treating the engagement like it was some high-stakes auction. This left the Su family representative scratching his head. He had no idea what he did wrong. After all, this wedding started as a marriage of convenience. The young man was cut off mid-thought when the butler came in with news that someone was looking for him. He welcomed the unexpected visitor, and soon enough, the sound of a woman's heels echoed through the room. A stunning lady approached, bowed with grace, and introduced herself, expressing her delight in welcoming the King of the North to Dragon City. Qing Hong nearly dropped his jaw. He had no clue Ba was such a big shot. The lady introduced herself as Mushi and proclaimed she was the president of the Asian branch of Kayosi's company. She relayed a message from the company's big boss stating they needed to transfer 10 billion to the Ning conglomerate. Shin Hong's mind was reeling. How could this be? He was convinced the Ning family was broke, and now this huge sum was surfacing. To Bei, this seemed like chump change. He casually asked the butler to escort the lady to her father to get that contract signed. Noticing the puzzled look on his guest's face, he added that he wasn't worried about money. If he wanted it, plenty would line up to give him whatever he asked. He then reminded everyone that the wedding with Chin was organized by his dad's generation, so if the Su family wanted to say something, it better come from his grandmother. That authoritative tone left Ching Hong in shock. He didn't expect to meet such a wise and confident young man. Ning Bay had been pondering all day why the Su family was so keen to cough up bucks just to end the engagement. They had to be scheming something. Those thoughts got pushed aside when a warrior barged into the office looking serious as a heart attack. Without missing a beat, B asked if they found the knuckleheads who'd stolen the ashes of his grandfather and fourth uncle. The warrior's face went ghostly pale as he reported that the captain sent him to say they hadn't tracked down the kidnappers. The rage bubbling inside our hero was so intense, he nearly crushed the glass beaker in his fist. The military guy cringed, thinking he might get the boot, and dropped to one knee to deliver the grim news that their men had picked up on some signs of fourth elder Ning. The shock that the fourth uncle was still alive hit the boy like a ton of bricks, causing him to slam his hands on the table, leaving a deep crack. The tense soldier reported they had only discovered traces, but all signs pointed to the elder still being alive. He ordered them to reach out to Luo City post-haste. Everyone should be on the lookout for this guy. He reiterated that the wedding with Chin was orchestrated by his dad's generation. If the Su family had any input, it was better coming from his grandmother. The commanding tone left Ching Hong completely taken aback, for never had he expected to sit across from such a wise and confident young man. Ning Bay had been chewing over why the Su family was ready to shell out a massive sum just to get rid of the engagement. They must have something up their sleeves. Those thoughts were shoved aside the moment a warrior stormed into the office to deliver some vital news. Putting all business aside, Bai shot out a question about whether they had tracked down the thieves who made off with the ashes of his grandfather and fourth uncle. The warrior's face turned to worry and tension as he shared that the captain had sent word saying they hadn't found the kidnappers. The anger boiling inside our hero was so fierce, it made him nearly crush the glass beaker in his grip. The military man must have sensed he was in trouble, for he quickly dropped to one knee and continued reporting that their people had only discovered traces of the fourth elder Ning. The revelation that the fourth uncle was still alive threw the kid for a loop, causing him to slam his hands on the table, leaving a significant crack. The anxious warrior disclosed they had only come across traces, but there were strong indications that the elder was still among the living. He promptly ordered them to contact Luo City without delay. Everyone should be in on the hunt for that man. He really wished he could believe that his favorite uncle was alive and not sliced open like a bad tomato. The Ning family's car zoomed out of Dragon City faster than a kid chasing an ice cream truck on a hot day, racing toward Luo. Ning Bay told the squad leader to crank it up even more, but they might break the sound barrier if they kept it up. No matter how hard they pushed the pedal, the traffic still had them caught like a cat in a tree. This had Xiao Yun-chun boiling with anger, itching to find out if fourth elder Ning had survived. A fellow stuck in the jam nearby blurted out that getting mad and honking was about as useful as a screen door on a submarine, since he was stuck here for 2 or 3 hours daily. Naturally, Ning Bay didn't want to waste precious time, so he suggested sending out a helicopter. Xia Yun-shan chimed in that one was just chilling nearby on a mission. The guy even promised to help them wrap this whole thing up. The only catch was to get him in there pronto. Nodding, the squad leader said he'd shoot the request up the chain right away. Not even 15 minutes later, the helicopter touched down like it belonged in a big-budget action movie, leaving everyone in traffic slack-jawed and wide-eyed. Folks couldn't figure out how or why a helicopter decided to crash their boring traffic jam party. Meanwhile, the squad seemed like they were picking up high-profile celebs stuck in gridlock every day. Ning Bay grinned from ear to ear as the ladder came down. He was itching to find out what happened to his uncle in Luo. Average Joes stared with their mouths agape as the odd dude took off in a chopper soaring right out of that mess of cars. The helicopter swooped over picturesque views, covering ground faster than gossip in a small town. Soon enough, it touched down on a clearing that looked like it was designed for picnics, not helicopter. As soon as Bay hopped out, he was laser-focused on the current situation. The squad members were scratching their heads, not sure what to spill, since they had no clue what they were up against. But Xiao Yunshan's commanding voice quickly snapped them back to reality, like a cold splash of water. One of the guys reported they were here to check out a missing person's tip and got attacked instead. The commander figured that Kobayashi was already in the primary league, meaning regular beasts stood no chance against him. Another warrior jumped into the chat and said the beast was no joke. It was moving at around 10 meters per second, so he guessed it was at warrior level. Ning Bay thought, well, we're not backing out now since we've already been spotted. So the commander ordered him to assist the injured man while they handled business in the meantime. Suddenly, our hero spotted some weird rustling in the bushes nearby. It was so quick, he initially thought he was just imagining it. But nope, Kobayashi caught something too, and shouted that it was a beast. Just like that, the creature vanished into thin air, leaving the warriors scratching their heads in confusion. Now everyone was sure they were up against something lightning fast. Out of nowhere, a young lady popped up throwing shade at the warriors, demanding to know if all the fighters in Dragon City were this weak. Her brother, who was standing next to her, tried to defuse the situation, but the girl was convinced the guys in front of her were utterly useless since they couldn't handle a wild beast. Listening to her tirade was anything but pleasant, so Xiao Yunshan asked who in the world was throwing shade at them. One of his crew said that the lady was named Loi Linger. She was the granddaughter of Loi Lao, a doctor from the Central Plains. The beast had attacked while she was out gathering medicinal herbs. Her brother, more of a peacekeeper than a fighter, apologized for his sister admitting she could be a bit rude sometimes. Those words held little weight until Linger finally acknowledged she might be a little out of line. In her quest to save her skin, one of the warriors she had called weak had gotten injured. After sizing up the girl, Ning Bay saw she was clutching a century-old herb that could ease pain. Jerking her bag away, Linger snapped, asking what they needed like she was the queen of the mountain and they'd interrupted her tea time. Such disrespect annoyed Ba, especially since everyone could see the poor warrior was bloodied and bandaged up. So it was as clear as day what they wanted from Her Highness. But our hero figured they wouldn't get much out of someone like her, so he told her to buzz off. In his view, if she thought experienced fighters were useless, she should be able to find her way out on her own. After hearing that, Loi Linger suddenly lost her bravado and whimpered that she needed protection from the beast. The squad leader jumped back into the mix, reminding them that their job was to take down the beast, not babysit her, since they weren't personal bodyguards. This really set the girl off, and now she was threatening that her grandpa would come after them for leaving her to the dogs. Xiao Shan couldn't take it anymore and shot back that Mr. Loi had been in the medical game for ages, so having a descendant hoarding a pain-relieving herb was just embarrassing for the family. By now, her brother was also blaming her for scaring off the squad from the clearing, but she didn't see it as her fault at all. Even though the girl was bold and brash, the squad leader was still concerned that the granddaughter of such a well-known doctor might be in trouble. Our hero figured they wouldn't get much from someone like her, so he told her to scram. If she thought the seasoned fighters were useless, she should be able to find her way back on her own. After saying that, Loi Linger instantly lost her nerve and claimed she needed to be protected from the beast. The squad leader chimed in again, reminding them their mission was to eliminate the beast, not play the white knight for the young miss, because they weren't personal guards at all. This really got under the girl's skin. Xiao Shan couldn't take it and said that Mr. Loi had years of experience. So having a descendant who hoarded an anesthetic herb like it was gold was a real disgrace to the family. By this time, her brother was also starting to point fingers at her for chasing the squad away. But his sister still didn't think she was in the wrong. Despite her boldness and rudeness, the squad leader was still worried for the granddaughter of such a prominent doctor in case she got hurt. Our hero figured they wouldn't get much from someone like her, so he ordered her to skedaddle. In his mind, if she thought the fighters were useless, she could find her own way out right. But his sister? Nope, she still wasn't feeling guilty about any of this. Sure, she was as bold as a lion and a tad rude, but the squad leader was still sweating bullets over the thought of that famous doctor's grandkid getting hurt. The hero didn't say a word because his sixth sense was buzzing that soon enough they'd have an unwelcome visitor who saw them as prey. Sure enough, a gigantic predatory kitty was barreling towards Leo Linger and her brother, looking all too pleased at having finally scored some dinner. The beast growled so loudly it made it clear that these little snacks weren't getting off the hook alive. Miss Lu hit the dirt and started calling for help, banking on those useless warriors to come to her rescue. You could practically feel the beast's powerful vibe radiating, announcing it was no ordinary cat. The girl felt it creeping up so terrified she was frozen stiff. All she could manage was a scream, but that sure as heck didn't stop the cat from pouncing, which could totally snuff out Lu Linger's light. Shell Yun Shan was sweating bullets, realizing their blunder the second they let the girl wander off alone toward the city. The critter was just too close to Doc's granddaughter for anyone to hope for. Lu Linger had her life cut short right there. Shell Yun Shan instantly regretted ever letting that girl waltz off by herself to the city. The creature was closing in, and there seemed to be no way to save her. Yet just when everything looked bleak, something that looked suspiciously like a leaf whizzed through the air and smacked the beast. He told his granddaughter that there was zero chance of saving her. But just when you thought things couldn't get wilder, something that looked like a leaf zipped straight into the beast's noggin. Suddenly, the colossal cat rolled over on its side and played dead. The terrified girl clawed her way from the scene. Her brother sprinted to her rescue, helping her up. Even at a distance, you could see poor Linger shivering like a leaf. The squad leader turned his head just in time to see their savior was none other than Ning Bay, who had used the first leafy thing he could grab as a weapon. The warriors couldn't believe their eyes and were in shock over the guy's skills. It dawned on them they were looking at a bona fide god of war. Mission accomplished, and our hero announced Xiao Yun-chan would be hitching a ride with him to Lua, while the rest were free to head back to Dragon City. The squad was scratching their heads, wondering. The warriors also perked up and were blown away by the dude's mad skills. They concluded that they were face to face with a real-life war god. Mission accomplished. Our hero boldly declared that Xiao Yun-chan was heading to Lua with him, while the rest of them could hightail it back to Dragon City. The squad members were completely scratching their heads, wondering why this random stranger was getting called the Commander of the North. I mean, seriously. This was their first time eyeballing him. But they all knew only one person could rock those shiny golden robes. That was the dude who got to boss around all 5 commanders. They didn't have time to ask who he was, because the mysterious guy hopped into a helicopter and zoomed off. While flying, Xiao Yun-shan dropped a bombshell, Ning Kunga, and then he whipped out the remote to showcase everything they had captured on camera. In the footage, a guy who looked shockingly like one of Nin's sons popped up. There was no mistaking it. Ning Bay was over the moon to find out Cannon was alive. His hopes shot up to full-blown confidence, especially after seeing that footage. Meanwhile, the guy was living his typical life, blissfully unaware that any of his relatives knew he was still kicking. He strolled into the local market, greeted by cheery faces with folks wondering if his famous candied hawthorn. His buddy, albeit a bit grudgingly, suggested if he needed cash, he could take her son's job offer, but Mr. Ning was a no-show for that interview. This little exchange was overheard by another lady who piped in that Ning Kangyan wasn't doing too hot health-wise, so the glamorous Mrs. Yao might just want to skip the bother. Realizing this, the woman explained her husband had sent, but Mr. Ning shot that down, claiming they couldn't take the money since they hadn't even settled their last debt yet. Despite her lip service, Zhao stubbornly held out the envelope to them. Kennan's wife was stumped on how to show gratitude to the generous lady, so she got her little daughter to say thank you to her auntie. But alas, the family's woes weren't done yet. A gang of rough-looking dudes was already heading their way, and they didn't seem friendly at all, demanding to know when the water bill would be paid. One of the employees begrudgingly forked over his share, pulling a satisfied grin from the ringleader. But it was clear this guy was in the red himself, as he immediately turned to Nino and asked when he would cough up his piece. Nino, the poor soul, told him he couldn't whip up that much dough on such short notice. That answer didn't sit well with the ringleader, who responded by kicking Kennan's bicycle over, making it crash to the ground with a loud thud. All the candied hawthorn Ning had hoped to sell was now strewn across the pavement. Picking up a stick of berries, Liang smacked Cannon on the head with it, sneering that he wouldn't lower the taxes just because he was whining. Daughter Na, unable to tolerate the sight of her daddy being humiliated, dashed over and shoved the thug hard, yelling that nobody was allowed to hurt her daddy. Elle roughly shoved the girl away, making little Gogo her mother rushed to comfort her, but the girl couldn't stop crying, not because of her knees, but because her father was being bullied. At that moment, Cannon felt a fiery rage bubbling within him, wanting nothing more than to obliterate that scoundrel on the spot. Just then, as the bike hit the ground, an envelope of cash, Ling realized his debtor was scheming to hide the money, fueling a fresh surge of fury in him. He started to threaten that he'd rip the man to shreds. Looking over at his wife, Ching, Keenan firmly ordered her to get their daughter home right now, as bandits circled them like sharks. The thugs grinned, mocking whether their debtor was gearing up for a fight. Without a word, Ning snapped the guy's arm faster than he could blink, leaving him no chance to react or block the hit. The whimpering ringleader began to whine like a child. He stomped his foot down so hard it echoed like a drum, all the candied hawthorn that Ning had been planning to sell. Yeah, it was now a glorious display on the ground. He picked up a stick of berries and gave Cannon a friendly tap on the head, with it informing him that his whining wouldn't be lowering any taxes around here. Daughter Na could not stand to see her daddy being put down like that, so she charged at the thug and shoved him, shouting like a tiny warrior that no one was allowed to hurt her brave daddy. Elle casually pushed the girl aside, and little Gogo went tumbling down, landing right on her knees like it was a comedy skit. Her mom jumped in to comfort her, but the girl was wailing her eyes out, and not just because of her bruised knees. Nope, the real drama was that her dad was in trouble. At that moment, Cannon felt this red-hot rage boiling inside him, like he wanted to obliterate this scumbag right there. Just as the bike tipped over, an envelope full of cash flew out of the basket like it had wings. The bandits noticed inside him there was this burning urge to take that rascal down right then and there. As the bike toppled over, a cash envelope spilled out of the basket. The bandits spotted it and plotted to snatch it. Ling snapped that his debtor was trying to hide the cash, and it sent his anger levels skyrocketing. He started barking threats about turning that guy into confetti. Looking at his wife, Ching, Cannon firmly told her to take their daughter back home, with the bandits circling around him like sharks. The thugs exchanged smirks, curious if their debtor was about to throw down. Without saying a word, Ning snapped the dude's arm faster than he could say, "Hey, watch out!" Without saying a word, Ning clamped down on the guy's arm faster than he could blink, leaving him no room to react. The injured ringleader started to whine like a little kid because, oh boy, his arm was hurting like crazy. A wild vibe was swirling around Cannon when he boldly declared that anyone could take him down because he totally deserved it after dropping the ball on protecting his brother's family. The dude practically lit up like a firework as he warned that anyone who dared to mess with his wife and daughter would meet their doom. The bandits didn't take him seriously at all. They smirked and told their debtor to zip it or death would come knocking at his door. Big mistake, underestimating their foe. Now they'd have to pay the consequences. Ning Kongan had no trouble bringing the pain to all his opponents. Now they were lying there knocked out and tumbling backward like bowling pins, desperately trying to avoid further embarrassment. When the thugs figured out that Ning wasn't going to just roll over, they turned tail and bolted, muttering that they wouldn't let this slide. But Cannon couldn't have cared less, especially since he just spat out blood like a geyser. He got a helping hand from a guy working close by trying to keep him upright. Seeing her husband in rough shape, Ching and her daughter dashed to his side. Nina was getting worse, and his pals insisted that they needed an ambulance stat. Just then, two warriors in black suits strolled onto the street like they owned the place. People recognized them as members of the squad. When the man spotted them, he panicked and told his wife to grab Guo so they could hightail it out of there. Mrs. Zhao shot back saying that was nonsense, because if they were dealing with bad apples, they could always call the cops. But Cannon assured them confidently that the police weren't always the solution. He told everyone to head home since they weren't just dealing with thugs, but real-life killers. Trying to keep it together, Mr. Ning boldly approached the warriors and remarked that Fukuo must have outdone himself this time, even getting the special operations team involved. The guys in uniform didn't bat an eye at his words. All they asked was if the guy in front of them was actually Ning Chong'an. Nodding, he revealed that he had been laying low for years, but it seemed he had finally been found to be taken out. Instead of taking action, the squad members greeted the fourth elder of the Ning family. This left Cannon utterly dumbfounded. He had no clue what was happening or why he was getting this VIP treatment. The squad explained that their commander had ordered them to find the long-lost fourth uncle, who everyone thought was toast. You could see Cannon's panic ease a bit after hearing that relief washing over him as he realized it wasn't Fukuo's lackeys standing in front of him. Finally, his body relaxed, but that was when the effects of the injuries from the bandits caught up with him, causing him to pass out. Cannon was carried into the house and an ambulance was called, showing up quicker than you could say emergency. The squad members rounded up the best doctors to check out the fourth elder of the Ning family. One medic grimly noted that the patient's pulmonary arteries were fried and there wasn't much they could do. One warrior was so furious at that response that he started threatening the doctor, but his buddy quickly told him to chill out. The doctor shot an angry glare back at the squad member, asking if he thought he didn't want to save the patient. Threatening wouldn't do anything for a patient on death's door. An elderly gent entered the room and said the young man shouldn't be blamed for his rage, since doctors typically spread doom wherever they went. Turning to his grandson, the old man asked him to fetch the silver games. Everyone froze when Ning Bay walked in, his serious gaze fixated on the bed where his uncle lay. A squad warrior approached him, informing him that the fourth elder was currently being assessed by acupuncture master Dr. Loyo. He requested that the patient be seated for a more precise examination. Closing his eyes, the healer focused his energy, which helped him gauge the patient's condition. He then firmly touched Kong Nan's forehead, seemingly channeling some of his healing energy into him capable of remedying his issues. It looked like everyone thought the patient was in some kind of trance for a minute there. It was so odd, yet calming. After coming back to himself, the first thing Cannon did was thank Mr. Liu for saving him, but the healer replied that it was a bit too soon for gratitude, since he couldn't fix the old injuries. Dr. Liu had set a pretty clear deadline of 3 days. He doubted the patient would last longer. After all, even the higher-ups would struggle to save his life. Ning Bay entered the room, and the squad members all saluted their commander. Recognition lit up Cannon's face, and he cautiously asked who stood before him. With a gentle smile, the boy told his fourth uncle that he was the one he had tried so hard to rescue that dreadful night. The man couldn't wrap his head around the fact that the little tyke crying next to his mother, reaching out for family, was standing in front of him. They embraced, and it felt like all the nightmares of those 13 years apart just vanished. Ning Bay said they would catch up later. Right now, the priority was patching up Uncle's wounds. This grated on Dr. Liu, who repeated that healing the patient was impossible, except that needles might buy a little time. Shooting a disgruntled look at the doctor, Bay mumbled that he was really hoping to witness the legendary doctor's skills. But once he saw them, he realized there was nothing out of the ordinary. Jabbing a finger into his uncle's chest, the kid said he could show him how to heal a sick person. He replied it was too early to say thank you, as he couldn't do anything about the old wounds. Dr. Liu had set a pretty clear deadline of 3 days. He didn't think the patient would go on much longer. After all, even the higher authorities would struggle to save his life. Ning Bay stepped into the room, and all the warriors immediately greeted their commander. Recognition sparked in Cannon's eyes, and he cautiously inquired who was standing before him. With a warm smile, the boy let his fourth uncle know that he was the one he had desperately tried to save on that fateful night. The man was in disbelief that the little lad who had been crying beside his mother, reaching out for relatives, was actually right there in front of him. They embraced, and it felt like all the horrors of those 13 years they hadn't seen each other just slipped away. Ning Bay asserted that they could chat later. For now, the main thing was to fix Uncle's injuries. This didn't sit well with Dr. Liu, who once again asserted that healing the patient couldn't happen. Needles might only extend life a bit. With a disgruntled glance at the Lord Bay, sighed that he truly wanted to see the legendary doctor at work. But when he did, he realized there wasn't anything out of the ordinary. Prodding his finger straight into his uncle's chest, he declared to see the legendary doctor do his wizardry, but once he laid eyes on it, he was like, "Oh, is that it?" He poked his finger right into his uncle's chest and said he could show him a better way to cure someone. He reached for the needles like a seasoned chef, grabbing a couple of kitchen knives, striding over to Countin with the confidence of a contestant on a baking show. The young man announced that not even the king of the underworld could snatch his beloved away. The doctor's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly touched the ceiling when he realized this dude had the chops to control the needles with key energy. With moves like that, he was on track to become the top healer in the land. The needles flared up with blue flames creeping toward the patient like an overenthusiastic cat stalking its prey. With one graceful motion of B.A.'s hands, they plunged into his uncle's arm, who yelped louder than a scared chicken. In that moment of chaos, our healer couldn't help but marvel at the young man's technique, the 7-needle transparent gate technique. It was like watching a magician reversing the laws of nature, and he couldn't help but wonder what kind of wizard was standing before him. Ning Bay told his uncle to keep those needles in for a full week. After 7 days, they could come out and everything would be back to normal, or at least as normal as it gets in their world. Then he turned on his heel, making a beeline for the door like a man on a mission. Spotting the cloak with the golden cillin, Lu suspected he was in the presence of the King of the North himself. Outside, Kanan's wife was anxiously asking how her hubby was holding up. The young man reassured her that he was just peachy and could use a bit of R&R. Then Boss squatted down to chat with little Gug. He asked her if she recognized him, and her mom chimed in, reminding her that Ning Bay's older brother Ning Bay had dropped by. The little girl was taken aback. Apparently her dad had told her her brother was off on a wild adventure. She related that's what people say about those who kick the bucket. Gently stroking the girl's cheek, Ba noticed a nasty scrape on her face and wondered how it got there. That question set the girl off in tears, spilling the beans about being whacked by a mean, bald uncle, who also gave her dad a hard time. Guo's sob story was enough to light a fire under the King of the North, who ordered his squad leader to hunt the scoundrel down and take him out. Meanwhile, the ruffian was just around the corner. He and his gang were headed to Cannon's house, ready to settle the score for daring to mess with him. Totally ignoring Bai, Liang pointed a finger at Ning Qing and grumbled about her being their debtor's wife. Inside Bai, Raj was bubbling up, and he had no intention of keeping it bottled up. With a dramatic flair, he ditched his cloak and stepped forward like a hero in a comic book, ready to put these thugs in their place. Without missing a beat, he unsheathed his sword and got ready to serve some justice. One swift swing, and Mr. Tough Guy was left standing on one leg, howling in shock. After taking a good look at the rest of the sorry lot, our hero asked who was next in line for a date with destiny. At first, these tough guys were rendered speechless, but when they finally regained their wits, they started yelling that they were part of the Axe Gang. Xian Shan gave the cockiest one a smack and declared it didn't matter which gang they belonged to. Their time was up. Protecting little Wo's eyes from the madness, Bee told her mom they ought to scram. He then turned to the squad leader and instructed him to give those who hurt his family a taste of their own medicine. The warrior was all too eager to jump on that train because he was itching to teach the lowlifes a lesson. While he handled the bandits, his team was escorting Ning Kong to Baskar. Neighbors were peeking out their windows, whispering that Na's family must be special. They figured the man was hiding from his enemies. One of the squad members approached Mrs. Yao with an envelope saying it contained the money they had borrowed from Ning Kong. Another warrior handed her a suitcase filled with what looked like shiny bars of precious metals, a token of appreciation from the commander. The neighbors cheered for her, claiming that good deeds never go unnoticed. She had taken care of the Ning family for ages, and now it was finally paying off. After a quick farewell, Bei took his family to a place they could proudly call home. Sitting in the car beside her parents, Gogo threw curious glances at Ba. Eventually, she couldn't keep quiet anymore and asked if he really was her brother. He smiled and nodded like a good big brother should. Kanan spilled the beans that when his chest got pierced with that sword, everyone thought he'd kicked the bucket, not knowing his heart had been doing a little dance to the right all along. Grabbing his wife's hand, he shared that she had been his secret savior, and they had kept a low profile together. For his sake, Qing hadn't even contacted her family. The woman shrugged, saying it was her personal choice and not worth overthinking. Ning Bay reminisced about how his fourth uncle was his childhood hero, bold and intelligent, a true warrior who crushed enemies with both his smarts and brawn. He chuckled, saying those were ancient memories, but he promised that as soon as they got home, he would be the man he used to be. By the time the car rolled up to the mansion, it was pitch black outside. At the gate stood a visibly annoyed Chinhee, clearly fuming about something. As soon as Ning Bay climbed out of the car, she launched into a tirade about how he was a big fat liar for not picking her up from college, and how she had been waiting for an eternity and a half. The guy flashed an apologetic smile, clearly not looking too guilty, and mumbled that he completely spaced on picking her up. Following Bay, Sugan emerged from the car, nervous but smiling, as she asked Chin if she remembered her. Surprisingly, the girl nodded, recalling her aunt, who she hadn't seen in ages. Ning Changlan emerged from the house, utterly stunned, to see his fourth brother standing right in front of him. She wasted no time calling him a big fat liar because he forgot to pick her up from university, and she had been waiting for what felt like an eternity, 1 hour and 30 whole minutes. The guy's face was mostly devoid of regret, as he apologized, saying he totally spaced out on picking her up. Following Bay, Sugin hopped out of the car, flashing a shy smile and asking if Chin remembered her. The girl recognized her aunt she hadn't seen in ages. Ning Changlan wandered out of the house, absolutely shocked that his fourth brother was actually standing right there in front of him. Ning Bay was over the moon to see his family back together again after all these years. Grabbing the lady's hand, Chin He yanked her into the house, declaring that Grandma was here too, so they should get the family reunion party started. When Suding laid eyes on her mom, whom she hadn't chatted with in 13 years, she was so speechless she could have been a statue. Mrs. Su beamed and teared up, pulling her daughter into a heartfelt hug. She still held a grudge for being in the silent treatment hall of fame for so long. Watching this tear-jerking reunion, the warmth filled the guys' hearts, and they couldn't help but break into big smiles. Leaving the elders to share their heartfelt moments, they decided to step out for a little stroll. The guy said sorry for totally forgetting to pick up Chin-hee. He was ready to jump through hoops for her, but the girl shot back that he had nothing to be sorry for. Yet she did have one goofy request, even if it was a bit silly. With a quirky grin, the young man told Chin to spill the beans, and he'd make it happen. It turned out she had a few wishes lined up. The first one was that from now on her aunt and grandma would enjoy a worry-free life. Nodding eagerly, the guy reassured her that while he was around, he'd make sure his loved ones were sitting pretty and protected. Chin's second wish was for smooth sailing with the finances of the Su family business empire, so her big bro could finally take a breather. Frowning like he just bit into a lemon, B.A. wondered if their mega business was in a pickle. The girl revealed they had been in a financial bind for 3 months, but her brother said things were tough due to some nasty conditions. The young man suggested pulling some cash and teaming up with the Ning family, but Chin-hee shook her head vigorously, insisting it wasn't as easy as pie. Without giving any details, she switched gears and announced she had one last wish in her back pocket. She originally thought of saying her wish was to maintain the engagement, especially now that they had a family reunion. But instead, what came out was totally different. The girl whimpered that she dreamed of a dude who didn't go to a standard school, getting his degree at a university and finishing a 4-year grind. Ning Bay recalled that a diploma from the Balin Military Academy put standard university degrees to shame. The girl then pointed out she had never even heard of it, leading to the real kicker. How is he supposed to land a job if the companies don't know about his academy? That made our hero burst out laughing. Chin-hee realized how ridiculous her suggestion was. After all, standing before her was the heir of the Ning family who didn't need to hang his hat on a traditional education. Ruffling her hair gently, Ning Bay assured her not to sweat it. He had promised to make all her wishes come true, especially since he was totally game for snagging a degree from a regular university. Moments later, the house guards announced the Schur family had rolled in for a visit. The head of the house stepped out and cheerily told the guests that if he had known they'd drop by so late, he would have rolled out the red carpet earlier. But Principal Shai was clearly in a foul mood. Instead of a friendly hello, he dove straight into how he couldn't care less about who won their family feud. He only gave a hoot that one of the Ning clan was a criminal who was up to no good. Grandma Su stepped up and asked what kind of mischief her son-in-law had pulled to ruffle the principal's feathers. The man motioned for his son, Jen Xiang, to shuffle closer to the old lady so she could size up how badly Ning Bay had hurt him. Cannon slid into the conversation with a grin, saying that the guy's injuries weren't life-threatening, so there was no reason to panic. Initially, Principal Schur was ready to blow a gasket, but once he spotted the fourth elder Ning in the room, his jaw just dropped in surprise. Looking at the bewildered man, Cannon couldn't help but beam and ask if the principal was doing all right. He was baffled. After all, everyone knew this guy had kicked the bucket years ago. Something was clearly fishy within the Ning clan. Nevertheless, the man couldn't shake the memory of his son getting the daylights beaten out of him, so until they got the scoop, they weren't going anywhere. It was hard to miss this gentleman's ready-for-a-fight demeanor, so Kong Nan sternly asked what type of explanation the man was after. According to Schur, it was a piece of cake. Ning Bay should stroll out, drop to his knees, and own up to his mistakes. Just then, Bay and Shin-hee ventured into the room. The girl was outraged by Mr. Schur's ludicrous demand. After all, his son was the first to toss around insults. With a fierce glance at her granddaughter, Grandma ordered her not to stick her nose into elder affairs. She felt that Ning Bay shouldn't trash everyone, so she nudged him to say sorry to the kid. But the Sure family wanted more than just a simple apology. They insisted on seeing the culprit grovel on his knees. Otherwise, the Ning family would face the music. Ning Bay wasn't on board with that plan and made it clear that Grandma was too cozy with the Sure family. Those words had Mr. Shea seeing red. He was repulsed that the young man would dare imply they were getting special treatment. The old lady urged Bay to show some respect. After all, Shear's grandfather was her sibling. As he stepped closer, our hero asked if he truly had to hit the ground and apologize. Once given an enthusiastic nod, he chuckled and muttered that in that case, the Shea family would never get his affection. That remark brought a grin to the family's patriarch's face. The man mouthed that the boy didn't need to sweat it. They were ready to face any fallout for a moment. So she pushed him to go ahead and say sorry to the kid. But the Sure family, they wanted more than just some half-hearted apology. They demanded the offender get down on his knees to repent. Because if not, the Ning family was in for some serious trouble. Ning Bay didn't exactly agree and voiced his thoughts on how Grandma was playing favorites with the Sure family. Those words lit a fire under Mr. Shea. He was all riled up over the suggestion that they were getting special treatment. Grandma told Bay to show some respect because, after all, Shear's granddad was her brother. As he strolled closer, our hero cheekily asked if he really had to get down and grovel. When they nodded, he chuckled and muttered that in that case, the Shea family could forget about getting his adoration anytime soon. That snarky retort made the family head smile of all things. The guy signaled that the boy didn't need to fret as they were bracing themselves for any fallout. Just for a second, everyone in the room figured that Ning Bay would actually hit the floor in front of these folks. Grandma Sue jumped up and hollered about how she didn't ask her son-in-law to go belly down, so he better cut it out. An old guy barged into the mansion, also telling the dude to stop. Jen Zong and his dad leaped up, wondering why their patriarch had shown up here. But instead of answering, the old-timer slapped his son right across the face and commanded him to hit the deck. The confused guy rubbed his cheek and asked what was going on, but Patriarch Shea bellowed again, demanding the kneel, and this time there was no way to disobey. The man obeyed, even though he was totally baffled about why. Ghanaian couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. Dropping to one knee, the old man bowed his head and announced that the mighty family of Dragon City welcomed Commander Ning. This left old lady Sue completely floored. She told her third brother that she would protect his family as long as she had breath in this house. But the folks from the Sure family just sat there staring in shock that their grandpa just dubbed this guy a commander. With a cheeky grin, Bai pointed out that he already said the lovely guests wouldn't be able to handle his respect. Turning his back on the kneeling guys, our hero declared that they had 10 seconds to vanish from his sight. Bowing again, the old man expressed gratitude for the kindness the lad had shown their family. Then he turned to his kin and ordered them to get the heck out of the Ning family's mansion ASAP. Considering the fiery scene, Grandma Sue figured she should bail too. Her daughter Ching volunteered to escort her out. The head of the house, scratching his head in confusion, asked his son why he ever got tangled up with the Sure family in the first place. Looking at his dad, the boy explained that Jenang was the one who poked the bear. Apparently, he was after Chin-hee. This all led to the little kerfuffle near the university. Ning Kong Lang noticed his son had done quite well for himself during those 13 years on the northern frontier. Turning his gaze away, the young man humbly declared he was defending their borders from the baddies, so no talk of glory or reward here. When morning rolled around, Ning Bay decided to take a breather and meditate to find his zen. But then in waltzes Chin-hee, accusing him of being a fibber. These words left the boy scratching his head, as he had no clue what she was talking about or what he did wrong. Sprung up to his feet, he listened as the grumpy girl wanted to know if he remembered his promise from the night before. With a big old grin, Bass assured her he absolutely remembered her wish and would keep his promise without a doubt. As they headed out of the house, our hero and his partner bumped into Ning Canland. They let him know they'd be stepping back for a bit. His dad mentioned that Mom was anxious about Ba fitting into society since he had spent a lot of years on a military base. The boy was taken aback to learn that his mom asked Shin-hee to shadow him at university. His companion winked and slyly mentioned she thought it wasn't too shabby of an idea. Ning Bay was super stoked that the girl didn't mind hanging out with him. When they reached the university building, it was a sight to see students casually strolling to their classes, chit-chatting away. After they passed by, Shinhee suggested they should visit the headmaster first and only then figure out where to go next. But when they got to the principal's office, his secretary informed them that the big cheese wasn't in the office and the kids had to sign in to see him. The girl figured there was no point in complicating things, so she just decided to call the person she needed. Unlocking her phone revealed a picture of Ning Bay sitting pretty on the home screen. No doubt he noticed it because a mischievous smile crept across his face, but the kid kept quiet. After she locked her phone, Shinhee awkwardly asked where his gaze was fixed, but he just chuckled and didn't reply. The girl tried dialing the principal for several minutes, but it was like the old man had flown the coop again. She figured he must be toasting it up somewhere. Her attention shifted to the fact that the guy was completely unfazed by her musings. He stood there, silent and staring at a portrait hanging on the wall. For some reason, he was oddly fascinated by the image of the old dude running the joint. Suddenly, he spun around, reached for her hand, indicating for her to pass him her phone. He wanted to make the call himself. The lad didn't comment on how he knew the man at all. He quietly dialed a secret line, which irritated the person on the other end. Ning Bay only spoke a few words, but his voice rang loud and clear to the king of the north. Not wanting to waste time with small talk, the guy jumped straight in, letting him know he was at Liang Academy and was burning to find out where teacher Seong Jen was at. The person on the phone replied that the man had once worked there, but was ousted due to complaints about him being a poor educator and lacking compared to the rest. Without missing a beat, the young man instructed him to locate Mr. Sun Jin and let him know to get in touch with him. His companion stood there completely flabbergasted. She asked, surprised, if the guy had studied with Professors Kunlin and Shu Yuan. Ba replied that he had indeed attended their lectures. A thrilled girl asked if he realized how remarkable those teachers were. One was a dean of a medical school, and the other a nuclear physicist who snagged an honorary Gordon Bell Award. To which B.A. pointed out that the girl still had no clue what kind of crazy place Bailey Military Academy was. Just a few ticks later, the young man called back. Now that's what I call quick service. It proved once again that B.A. was someone who mattered. It was the teacher's son, our main guy, who politely asked the gentleman to swing by his office as he was right at the front door. The head honcho finally remembered that Chin had tipped him off yesterday about a new student joining the university, but he had no inkling that it was the king from the north. The dude was totally unfazed by the fact he was ditching an important meeting. He tossed all that business aside and marched straight to the office. A few minutes later, Mr. Sun found himself standing outside his office, beaming like a welcoming committee for the visitors. Swinging the door open, the principal invited the boys inside to hash out all the important stuff. Shinhee introduced Ning Bay and said this was the exact student she had been raving about. The director mentioned they were already acquainted from 5 years back. However, Ning Bay insisted on making a formal introduction. He stated his name and added that he was the eldest son of the Ning family hailing from Dragon City. The fact that the guy was born in Dragon City made the principal do a double take, since Bay never dropped that tidbit back when he was at the academy. Shinhee jumped in and asked Mr. Sun to help them with the paperwork so they could speed up the admission process, but had never mentioned it while he was in the military academy. Shinhee jumped into the conversation and asked Mr. Sun if he'd help speed up the documents, because who wants to drag this out? But Songjun flat out said that enrollment was a no-go. The girl nervously asked what the deal was. It turned out the principal thought that with BA's skills and intelligence, studying here would be like trying to teach a fish to climb trees. He suggested the dude could be an honorary dean. This proposal didn't tickle our hero's fancy at all. He couldn't promise he'd show up on the daily. Song Jen urged the guy to not dismiss the offer so quickly. He hadn't even asked about his salary, after saying that the gentleman pulled out a massive box. When he plopped it on the table, the guys were taken aback to find a huge rock inside. Chin guessed it was a diamond, but Bei corrected him, saying they were looking at something even more precious, a spirit stone. Holding it up, the young man explained that the Tang Empire was built by martial arts masters. These stones were essential for their growth and training. The stones were rare gems, but even so, the headmaster proposed to give Bei one a month as a paycheck for his dean duties. This left the young man flabbergasted, and he asked if the gentleman actually had that many spirit stones. sheepishly. Voruer admitted there was just one available at the moment, but he was confident he could rustle up more. Yet our hero was only down to work for 3 stones a month and wasn't budging on that. Oddly enough, Director Sun was thrilled about that news and jumped straight to a handshake, like they'd just struck gold. Afterward, the dude stormed out of the office. Chin. He asked where Sun had run off to, and Ba shrugged, saying Sun must have bolted to hunt for spirit stones. When the headmaster returned, his colleagues couldn't help but follow him, like groupies, all wanting a glimpse of the King of the North. As they filled the office, they gaped at how young the guy was, about whom they couldn't help but follow him. Because let's be real, everyone wanted a peek at the King of the North. Once they entered the office, they couldn't help but marvel at how young the guy was given all the stories that had been flying around. So many wild stories had been flying around. Sun asked his colleague Lee if he remembered the anti-gravity theories published by Mr. Yang in an academic journal. Adjusting his glasses, Lee exclaimed it was hard to forget that, because the article shot anti-gravity research 10 years ahead, but he admitted he was lost about what the question pertained to. Pointing at Ning Bay, the director declared that this brilliant work was crafted by the guy standing right there. The professors were up in arms, asking why Mr. Yang would want to swipe someone else's genius. But Ning Bay cleared the air by saying it ain't stealing if he gave permission to use it. Now, everyone was super intrigued about what the young would want to snag someone else's glory, like it was a trophy. But Ning Bay clarified that using someone's work isn't theft if he has permission. Now everyone was super intrigued about what the article was actually about. Without missing a beat, Bay chimed in saying he aimed to unveil the industrialization of anti-gravity in his project. These words left everyone in the room scratching their heads, because it was obvious the guy had a totally fresh perspective on the subject. As the silence dragged, Bay mumbled he wasn't keen on wasting time on chit-chat. He was about to head out when suddenly one of the professors shouted for him to stop and revealed he too possessed a spirit stone. The mention of this special gem grabbed the guy's attention, making him hesitate in his exit, especially when the other men chimed in saying they too had this stone. Our hero was shocked to discover that all the teachers in the room were packing spirit stones. One of them explained that 10 years back, Chung had explored Mount Beyond and stumbled upon this stone, mistaking it for a diamond. But once he returned and dug deeper, he realized it was something entirely different, so he handed out pieces like they were candy. And when Sun said the King of the North needed them, they gathered them up and brought them over. Now our hero was utterly fascinated about where this remarkable mineral was actually found. The men, with a twinge of nostalgia in their voices, said that only Chung knew the exact spot. Bay asked if he could meet Professor Chung. Unfortunately, he was informed that was a no-go. Director Song Joon added that the man had long since passed away. Nobody even knew the whereabouts of that colossal stone, making it super hard to track down. The principal mentioned that the professors would get to weigh in on Mr. Ning as dean. He was ready to make it his personal mission. But his colleagues thought he was just pulling their leg because they figured the article on anti-gravity was enough for Mr. Nina to earn an academic title. One faculty member chimed in saying deans usually guide students and oversee massive research projects. The team believed the guy should join their squad because their primary research focus was on the industrialization of anti-gravity. Holding the stone in his hand, the young man confidently stated they would definitely hash it all out. But first, he was curious about the stone. He learned that Chung and Wong had discovered it on Mount Beyond. They didn't have any more info, though. And now the guys were MIA, leaving them in the dark. After a moment of contemplation, Bay inquired how long those professors had been out in the mountains. The director replied they'd been out there for about 10 days. The men didn't pack too much food, so they didn't plan on being away for long. It was clear 2 guys couldn't have ventured too far in 10 days and returned. So the search area was capped at 100 miles. Despite the uncertainty, Bay was thrilled that the Spirit Stone's location was within a known zone. As he stepped out of the university, he asked where Ning Bay was heading next. He replied that he was heading home right away, for with these stones he could easily get his mother back on her feet. At that moment, the girl couldn't help but think that trying to get Bay into university was a hopeless mission. As he strolled through the city, he noticed a crowd gathering around something that seemed really intriguing. Getting closer, he saw an overturned ambulance next to where a victim lay. Nearby, men were shouting angrily. One guy was demanding compensation for his car, but he was rudely informed that he shouldn't throw himself at people when driving under the influence. This just fired up the jerk even more. He then landed a punch on the guy's face and claimed he could do whatever he wanted. When the onlookers realized he was from the D family, they all shifted back, not wanting to stir up trouble with him. A girl sitting next to the victim was pleading for someone to help her grandfather, explaining that her brother had just returned from the northern border after a decade away, and all he wanted was to see the old man. The young lady, tears streaming down her face, begged the elderly man to hang on, because he too wanted to see his grandson more than anything in the world. That's when Ning Bay emerged from the crowd, striding up to the scene with purpose. The first thing he did was demand that Mr. D let the man go immediately. Doug complied begrudgingly, instantly questioning how this guy had the nerve to boss him around. When Ning Bay turned around, the Lord thought his rant had scared the kid off, sending him fleeing with his tail between his legs. This gave him some misplaced courage, and he whipped out his dagger to teach the cheeky boy a lesson. Mr. D was planning to attack from behind, believing his opponent was weak and wouldn't be able to fend off the assault. However, Bay only needed one swift move to disarm his clumsy foe, who for some reason believed he was a mighty warrior. The poor guy hurt his arm from the impact and started wailing all over the street about the excruciating pain he was in. Approaching one of the victims, Ning Bay felt for a pulse and concluded that there was no point trying to save this poor soul. Then he moved on to the injured old man and his granddaughter. Bay asked about her brother who had served on the northern border. She confirmed that he indeed had, and then she asked if the young man could assist her grandfather. Leaning over the elderly man, B.A. conducted a quick examination and figured that his illness wasn't too serious, meaning it could be treated with ease. The bewildered girl mentioned that 6 months prior, doctors were shocked he was still alive at all. She thought his condition was pretty dire. Just then, doctors rushed over anxiously asking how Mr. Chow was faring. The young girl lit up when she spotted her Uncle Jen rushing to the rescue. The doctor who hurried over calmed the crying Yun, instructing her to get Mr. Chow to the hospital ASAP. But Ning Bay thought that was a terrible plan since the patient was in a critical state and moving him could make things worse. The doctor didn't appreciate being questioned, so he asked who was standing in front of him. Instead of answering, B.A. demanded silver needles be brought to him at once. Without any hesitation, the man quickly fetched them and then asked how the kid knew he had them. There was no need to answer that, as the doctor promptly fell silent upon realizing B.A. could handle those tools with ease. In just a few seconds, the needles were already precisely placed in the elderly gentleman's body. All they could do was hope for the best. All the healers were flabbergasted at how skillfully the guy manipulated the needles with keys. Yet the old man still didn't open his eyes, and his body began to tremble, and it just wouldn't stop. That's when our hero realized he needed to use the spirit stone he got from director Sun Jin. By channeling his power into this item, Bay activated its healing effect, and that power kicked off the healing process. In less than a minute, the male victim had already regained consciousness and opened his eyes. But the old man still kept his eyes shut, and his body began to tremble like a bowl of jelly. That's when our hero figured it was about time to whip out that spiritual stone he scored from director Sun Jin. By channeling his power into this object, Bay kicked off its healing magic, and it started working its magic. Not even a minute later, the dude had come to blinking his eyes back open. Ning Bay told the gentleman that he had added a whole extra year to his life, and if he watched his health like a hawk, he could stretch it another 3. Just when our proud hero was ready to skedaddle, the old man called him back. Not only was the healed dude itching to have a word with Ba, but a member of the W family who had previously tried to stab him was strutting his way over. He demanded that the young man introduce himself. This cocky rich guy had already worn out his welcome with our hero, so he casually swung his hand, channeling some of his power to deal with the jerk from a distance. Instead of getting the answers he wanted, Mr. Cocky ended up with a fist to the face and now lay there on the pavement, trying not to lose consciousness. The bystanders were shook. Who in their right mind would take a swing at someone like Mr. Do? The old man, hoisted by his granddaughter, reassured the lad that he shouldn't sweat the consequences because he'd take care of everything. Offering his business card to Bay Grandpa, said if he bumped into trouble in Dragon City, he could hit him up anytime. His granddaughter beamed, genuinely thanking him for his help. Our hero shrugged and asked what the name of the girl's brother was, the one who was stationed on the northern front. The young lady said his name was Chaung. You could see she was bursting with pride for her relative. This name rang a bell for Ning Bay because it belonged to the Eastern Wolf. The girl was taken aback, asking if he knew her brother. The young man nodded enthusiastically, saying that Chao was a true hero, having led Baiyang's army of hundreds of thousands of elite warriors and bagging himself a ton of military accolades. Relatives of the East Wolf were over the moon to hear such praise. They swelled with pride even more because he truly earned it. Curiosity piqued Jen decided to ask our new friend's name too. After introducing himself, the boy added that if the family ever needed anything, they could track him down with the Ning family. It was clear these folks were grateful for both their lives and for the guy sweetly offering his assistance. The next day rolled around and a heartwarming occasion unfolded at the Ning family home. After 13 long years, Mrs. Ching Hong Lang finally kicked the injury to the curb and was back on her feet, watching the happy mom, her eyes sparkling like they had many years ago. Our hero realized he wouldn't think twice about shelling out 7 spiritual stones for something like this. Mushi, the president of Kaiosi's Asian branch, strolled into the mansion, congratulating the woman on her comeback. As it turned out, she was there to let the family know that $10 billion had just been wired into the Ning conglomerate's accounts. This news sent a wave of joy through the guy. He asked Mushi to visit the Ning conglomerate and help his father launch an exploratory subsidiary. After getting the green light to kick off with Mount Bien, the woman was off to fulfill the mission. The news raised some eyebrows from his mother, who was clearly curious about why her son suddenly decided to get into geological digging. But Ning Bay kept his lips sealed cryptically, stating that he was on a specific treasure hunt. Night fell a time for winding down and blissful Z's. Except for some folks, it was anything but. Ning Bay's peace shattered the moment Shin barged into his room, demanding he throw on some clothes and follow her immediately, ripping himself away from the magazine he was engrossed in. The guy asked if she really meant to drag him to Tong Yusing's birthday bash together. This question sent her into a fury. She couldn't fathom why he was still lollygagging around if she knew perfectly well they needed to hit the party. Noticing he was dragging his feet, Chin-hee edged closer, pouting that she really wanted him to keep her company. That sweet voice melted a bit of Bay's resolve as he casually mentioned he wasn't too keen on such loud shindigs. Realizing her tactics weren't cutting it, the girl pivoted and called for Auntie Ching. The mother, now on her feet, approached the boys and said that if her son didn't go with his fiancée, he'd make her look bad by having to explain his absence. Feeling the pressure from these two women he cherished, the guy suddenly thought to himself that life in the border camp was a cakewalk compared to this. He was backed into a corner. He had to don a fancy getup and follow wherever the bride led him. The main thing was to remember to stay safe. Watching the guy strap on his weapon, Chinny asked if it was really necessary. This got Ning Bay thinking maybe he was overdoing it. Perhaps he could try to chill out a bit. Anxious thoughts of potentially crashing into Dragon. City society made him leave his sword where it hung. He opted to ditch the fancy clothes, thinking it was better to dress down and be himself than to pretend to be someone he wasn't. When evening arrived, a shiny red car zoomed down the road, ensuring its passengers arrived at the event in style. Throughout the ride, Chin-hee kept musing about how fate had linked her with a true hardhead who only did things his way. Finally, the car came to a stop in front of the Sanyang Entertainment Center, where loud music was already blasting. The dancing crowd in this place radiated relaxation and freedom. As soon as Shin-hee's friends spotted her, she waved eagerly, urging her to join them at their table. The girl rolled her eyes and asked if they had already started drinking without her. Her friend chuckled awkwardly and lifted her glass. The dude sitting nearby immediately asked who had tagged along with Chin-hee. Since this was the first time they'd seen this mystery person, the friend revealed it was her fiancé, who had apparently been raised under strict orders since he was a kid. For some bizarre reason, this revelation sent the guys into fits of laughter. They found it hilarious that someone still picked wedding party members based on childhood credentials. Shin-ha felt super embarrassed and just plain uncomfortable. She snapped at the guys to knock it off with the teasing about her and her boyfriend. But Tang Zon, the nice guy in the group, stepped in to thank Ning Bay for showing up and for bringing Chin-hee to his little sister's shindig. That comment sent Yusen into a huff, pointing out it was crystal clear that she was the older one in their duo. Chuckling, Chin-hee explained that the guys were twins and Yusing had popped out 10 minutes before Xiao Yun. When Ning Bay was offered a chance to relax with a drink, he quickly turned it down, claiming he wasn't allowed to sip. Yaun didn't push back, suggesting they could let loose for the day and just enjoy the moment. But if they really didn't want to, no one would force them to break their principles. Unfortunately, the other guys didn't agree, thinking that if a guy didn't drink, it meant he was disrespecting the birthday girl and ruining the fun for everyone. The pressure from his friends annoyed Xiao Yun, who told them to cut it out and not start a fight. To steer things clear of drama, Chinhee bravely declared she would drink to the birthday girl's health instead of her fiancé's. The guy clearly wasn't thrilled with that plan, even though the girl insisted it was no biggie and she'd handle it just fine. Party organizer friends started mocking Ning Bay, calling him a wuss. Friends were pushing the guest, totally irking Xiao Yun, who grumbled and told them to keep the noise down. To avoid any drama, Chinhee declared she'd drink to the birthday girl's health instead of her fiancé's. The guy wasn't thrilled about this plan, even though the girl insisted it was cool and she'd have no issues with it. The friends of the party planners began to snicker, claiming that Ning Bay was a total softie for letting his girlfriend do the drinking. One dude even branded Ning Bay as a castaway, a pooch tossed aside after his family kicked the bucket. They rolled their eyes and called Ning Bay a wuss for letting his girlfriend drink instead. One of the guys labeled Ning Bay just an abandoned pup, a poor dog thrown away after his fam bit the dust. With a loud clink, Zhao slammed his glass down on the table and ordered Mr. Shi to knock it off with the nonsense. After all, it was his sister's birthday, and he'd take out anyone who tried to ruin the celebration. Yusen halted the tension by saying they all needed to chill and unwind a bit. Ningbi frowned as he took the glass from Chinhee's hand, causing her to ask what in the world he was doing. Softening up a little, the guy said he had promised his grandmother he'd watch over his fiancée, so he wasn't about to let her drink on his behalf. Chinhee tried to protest, insisting Ba forbade such things. But he downed the drink in one go. Afterwards, he muttered that he'd have to break either the rule or the promise, and he chose what was best for her. That made her smile faintly, as the gesture showed Ba cared about her, which meant he had feelings. Noticing the guest had loosened his grip on his principles, Xiaoan suggested they make another exception. Her smile faded, but the gesture showed she cared, which meant she had some feelings deep down. Noticing that the guest had loosened up a bit, Xiaoan offered to make yet another exception and share a cocktail with him. Seeing the guys starting to bond and have a good time, the birthday girl waved her friend to join her on the dance floor. Another guy decided to mix things up and ordered a cocktail. As the boys began to vibe together and have a blast, the birthday girl sauntered over to her friend, gesturing for her to join her on the dance floor. At that moment, a cheerful guy strolled over, beaming and asking why he wasn't invited to hang out with them. Join was thrilled to see his third brother, Ua. He hadn't even expected his brother to show up at today's party. Seizing the chance, the birthday girl's brother introduced Ning Bay to UF, even though the latter had probably heard of the eldest son of the Ning family who was busy making waves again. Nodding his head, the newcomer said he'd indeed heard plenty about the dude who'd literally rocked Dragon City just by showing up. Watching Yong knock back drink after drink, our hero suggested he should probably ease up on the booze considering his health issues. His new buddy looked super surprised and asked if the guy had any medical expertise. The fact that UFO didn't deny having health issues made Xiao Yuyun super cautious. So, the third brother had to explain he was part of the Special Operations Squad and had once encountered a major mishap. Once their captain had brought in a real beast with incredible strength to prepare them for actual combat, and Yong admitted he couldn't even withstand 10 blows. Surprised by the tale, Xiao Yun asked if he had really made it to the rank of a warrior, but Ning Bay felt if that was true, it wouldn't have been so easy to slip away. This made Yu Fang curious if Ba had martial arts skills too. The guy blurted out that he did.